Chapter 28-29. I'm even happier with the praise of spiritual master He Ping. Huijishan grinned and laughed. According to the decision of the meeting hall, we attacked from the direction of floating Duckweed Mountain and forced the sword cultivators to retreat to Huan Country. The other cultivators broke through from Pingmu Prefecture, Shilong Tomb, Green Lake and Lumeng Sect. Now it seems that we are the ones who got the most credit. Sun Yunzi looked very happy. After all, he was one of the cultivators with the highest cultivation in the Taoist sect. Being able to lead many nascent soul and early-stage cultivators to take down floating Duckweed Mountain first was naturally a great honor for him. However, after everyone was happy, Sun Yunzi glanced at everyone in the main hall and asked a nascent soul early-stage cultivator with a smile. By Kongzi, this battle is over. Although the Blazing Fire Mountain has made a contribution, your Suyen school has also made a contribution in setting up the formation. This old man has noted it down. What should we do next? Should we continue to pursue? Or should we stabilize the front? Bai Kongzi was a handsome young man. He was even a little short. However, when everyone was talking and laughing, he always kept a smile on his face. When he heard Sun Yunzi's question, he raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, My Suyen school has the ability to plan, but all the attacks have to rely on your disciples. This credit belongs to everyone. My Suyen school doesn't dare to monopolize it. Well said. Sun Yunzi clapped his hands and said, Our Taoist sect cultivators should be united and cooperate like this. We can't swarm like mosquitoes just because of a little credit. Bai Kongzi still had a smile on his face and said, However, as for the next step, I don't dare to say blindly. Let's ask our disciples to come in and give us advice. That's right. Fire Void also slammed the table and shouted, Quick, call that kid over. His provocation is really effective. I only mocked Wang Liuxi in front of the battle, and the entire Lu Jian sect is angry. Even if Jiaojia doesn't want to go, she has to go. Otherwise, we may not be able to take down floating Duckweed Mountain. Yes, I will call him over now. With that, Bai Kongzi whispered a few words to the disciple of Su Yen's school next to him. That disciple's face was also flushed, and he walked out quickly as if he was extremely proud in front of the crowd of practitioners. Humph! A faint cold snort sounded from the corner. Sun Yunzi glanced over and unconsciously frowned. This voice belonged to none other than an early-stage nascent soul cultivator with an arrogant look on his face and a nose that was almost pointing to the sky. Not only did Sun Yunzi frown, but his eyes were also filled with disgust. He even wanted to reach out and pinch this cultivator's nose off and stuff the thing back into his mouth. Although this cultivator was only at the early nascent soul stage, his tone was extremely arrogant. Even Sun Yunzi, who was at the late nascent soul stage, didn't seem to care about him. If it weren't for the fact that they were both cultivators from the state of Shi, Sun Yunzi would have taught him a lesson. Wasn't this cultivator Quangtian of the Imperial Thunder sect? Sun Yunzi had long heard of this Quangtian. When Quangtian was still in Gantian Mountain, Sun Yunzi had heard of his domineering deeds of bullying the weak more than once. However, Sun Yunzi had never taken it seriously. After all, to him, Gantian was just a little kid. But now, this little kid was actually at the nascent soul stage. Moreover, even when he was talking to the late nascent soul stage sect leader of Shanghua sect, his attitude didn't seem to be very respectful. Of course, this disrespect was just Sun Yunzi's own thoughts. Quangtian didn't directly do anything disrespectful to Sun Yunzi. In fact, when he spoke to Sun Yunzi, he was abnormally respectful. However, no matter how Sun Yunzi looked at Quangtian, he didn't like him. Besides, Quangtian was arrogant and didn't bully others for no reason. It was just that he didn't leave any leeway in his words and even fought with others during many discussions. However, at this time, the meeting hall had been divided into several parts. Before Sun Yunzi set off, he had already said that any nascent soul cultivator, no matter how high or low their cultivation, could express their own opinions. After all, it was good to gather ideas. Sun Yunzi originally thought that with his prestige, no one would talk nonsense about him. However, he really didn't expect to meet Kuang Tian. No matter what, this guy would express his opinion, no matter whether it was right or wrong, no matter how big or small. For example, now, this cold snort was very inappropriate. Not to mention by Kongzi, even Sun Yunzi knew that Kuang Tian was going to express his opinion again. What's so great about this? It's just a trick to provoke him. Kuang Tian's slender eyes slightly raised, and he was extremely disdainful. Only a sword cultivator from the Huan country can be so petty. He actually got angry over such a small matter. In fact, when you think about it, his name has been ridiculed by many people since he was young. Last time, fellow Taoist had a fight with him. How can he avoid it this time? Fellow Taoist Kuang Tian. Bai Kongzi glanced at Sun Yunzi's somewhat green face and said lightly, "In that case, why didn't you give any good suggestions that day?" "Huh? Fellow Taoist Bai Kongzi? Weren't you there that day?" Kuang Tian was stunned. "I seem to have made no less than 3 suggestions that day, right? I remember. Fellow Taoist Bai Kongzi quarreled with me. In the end, you didn't seem to accept my suggestions. I think that if you had used my strategy, the victory would have been more fruitful than now." Fine. Bai Kongzi said contemptuously. Fellow Taoist Kuang Tian's 2 tricks are really low level. They were seen through by the sword cultivator at a glance. Damn it, my tricks are low level, but your family's provocation is even worse. Kuang Tian shouted. Just calling someone's name a few times. Is it high level? Kuang Tian. Sun Yunzi frowned and said, "Watch your words." "Yes. Senior brother Sun Yunzi." Kuang Tian immediately became obedient and hurriedly said respectfully, "I just feel that the sword cultivator's obvious defeat under such a clumsy provocation is really strange. Therefore, I have no choice but to take the risk of making senior brother unhappy by saying it. Clumsy. Obvious. Strange." Every word was incompatible with the victory that Sun Yunzi and the others had said just now. Sun Yunzi was helpless. He waved his hand and squeezed out a smile, saying, "Say it. We're all brainstorming for the victory of the Tao sect. There's no harm in saying it. I always felt that the sword cultivator had other motives for retreating from the Duckweed Mountain so easily," Kuang Tian said with a very serious face. "Moreover, when I saw that Wang Liushi got angry after hearing fellow Taoist Hua Picong ridiculing his name, he couldn't help but fall into the trap and join forces with Zhang Sanpin and Jiaojia to fight the 3 elders of the Blazing Fire Mountain. Who doesn't know that the 3 elders of the Blazing Fire Mountain are used to working together? Now that they've obtained an opportunity, they're about to step into the middle nascent soul stage. Not to mention the 3 of them, even if there's another first-grade sword transformation stage cultivator, they may not be a match for the 3 elders. How could they be so brainless as to join forces?" Kuang Tian. Bai Kongzi sneered. "So you're saying that the Jindan disciples, Foundation Establishment disciples, and even Qi refining disciples of my sect fought in vain? So many sword-nurturing, bright sword, and illusory sword disciples died in vain? If these disciples didn't fight to the death, and they saw that the situation was irreversible, would they have proposed a bet? If it was as you said, do you think it would have such an effect? Could they have achieved such a result? I'm just raising an objection. Things that didn't happen, who knows? Everything is possible." Kuang Tian shrugged his shoulders. "Moreover, I feel that there's something fishy about their retreat. This might even be a diversion tactic that sword cultivators often use." Good. Bai Kongzi sneered. "You're talking about diversion, right? Then which direction do you think the sword cultivators attacked? And which direction did the sword cultivators attack?" Bai Kongzi. Kuang Tian's face also turned cold. "I'm just guessing. Why are you in such a hurry? I'm not a roundworm in the stomach of the sword cultivators. How can I know what they're thinking? If I knew, why would I still need your Jindan disciple? You obviously saw that my Su Yen school's new military exploits overshadowed your Imperial Thunder sect's limelight, so you were jealous. That's why you tried your best to erase the contributions of my Su Yen school and the other sects, and wanted to expand the contributions of your Imperial Thunder sect. Bai Kongzi was obviously a little anxious. But before Bai Kongzi could finish speaking, Reverend Miyu, who was next to Kuang Tian, coldly interrupted him. Bai Kongzi, you can eat pills indiscriminately, but you can't talk nonsense about this. My Imperial Thunder Sect fought for 10 years in the Great War of Tao and Sword, and the military exploits we achieved were piled up with blood and flesh. No one can erase this. Although my Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples achieved the most military exploits, and Junior Marshal Brother Wu Ming saved more than 100,000 of my Tao Sect's disciples, when did my Imperial Thunder Sect ever mention this? The blood spilled by the various sects is not much less than that of my Imperial Thunder Sect. When my Imperial Thunder Sect mentions military exploits, it only talks about the other sects, and never flaunts itself. On the contrary, fellow Taoist Bai Kongzi seems to have mentioned this several times, right? Are you not satisfied with the fact that my Junior Marshal Brother Wu Ming saved more than 100,000 disciples? That's right, the Imperial Thunder Sect's brilliance in the Great War of Tao and Sword of Tao in the Jindan stage was really dazzling, and the military exploits they achieved were beyond the reach of the other sections. Although Kuang Tian never mentioned it, his words were always insinuating it, so how could the cultivators of the other sects not complain in their hearts? On the other hand, Su Yan's school gradually emerged in the second stage of the Great War of Tao and Sword. Bai Kongzi vaguely wanted to compare himself with the Imperial Thunder Sect, and occasionally mentioned it, but how could he mention it several times like Reverend Miyu? Miyu. Bai Kongzi was also angry. When did this old man always mention it? On the contrary, isn't there something wrong with your Imperial Thunder Sect's contribution? This Wu Ming, where is he? You have to let this old man see him, right? Let this old man see who the number one hero of the Great War of Tao and Sword is, right? -11. Chapter 2830. Sun Yunzi saw that Bai Kongzi, who was originally reasonable, had lost his sense of propriety under the joint efforts of Spiritual Master Miyu and Spiritual Master Kuang Tian, and even spoke rudely. He wanted to cough a few times to remind him, but when he heard that Bai Kongzi's words were related to Nameless, he immediately stopped. Yes, John Doe of the Thunder-controlling sect was really mysterious. In the Battle of the Sword Tomb, he appeared for a brief moment, and then disappeared without a trace. Until now, the Thunder-controlling sect still hid John Doe, and did not let anyone know who he was. How could this make Sun Yunzi feel at ease? Ha! This is an internal affair of the Imperial Thunder Sect. Fellow Taoist Bai Kongzi, you don't have to worry about it. Spiritual Master Miyu smiled proudly. You only need to know that it was a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect who saved hundreds of thousands of disciples of the Tao Sect and scared away the sword cultivators. Humph, who knows if it was a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect or not? I haven't even seen this Nameless until now. Bai Kongzi sneered, but he immediately regretted it after saying that. Sure enough, Spiritual Master Kuang Tian opened his mouth and laughed wildly, shaking the entire hall. Ha! Fellow Taoists, Bai Kongzi's words are really funny. Apart from the disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect, which other sect's disciple knows the Thunder Escape technique? If he was a disciple of the Su Yan faction, how could he wear the battle robe of the Imperial Thunder Sect? What right does he have to give all the credit to my Imperial Thunder Sect? Cough, cough. Sun Yunzi seized the opportunity to cough and reminded. Kuang Tian, we're talking about your plan. Why is it related to Nameless? Why is it related to the Battle of the Sword Catacomb? That's all in the past. Why are you still talking about it? Moreover, no one can erase the contributions of the Imperial Thunder Sect. You can't always remember the past. Instead, you should look ahead and see what the sword cultivators are planning to do now, and then make new contributions to the Imperial Thunder Sect. This? How could Spiritual Master Kuang Tian have a plan? But he was very thoughtful, so after a slight thought, he smiled and said, Senior Brother Sun Yunzi is right. I have no reason to lower myself to the same level as others. I should listen to Senior Brother's teachings and give more advice to the cultivators of the Tao Sect. Junior Brother Kuang Tian. After talking for so long, what are your thoughts? You should say them now. Other than Reverend He Ping of the Utopia faction of the Lian Kingdom, who had been laughing without saying anything, Reverend Yun Mengzi and Reverend Jingyu of the Changbai faction of the Ming Kingdom were also laughing. Haha, senior brother Jingru! Little brother really has some ideas! Seeing Taoist Jingru speak, Crazy Heaven smiled and said, However, this little brother's idea is still not mature. Senior brother Jingru, please speak first. Don't I boast that I only know some refining techniques, but I've always been lacking in strategizing. I won't embarrass myself. It's better to listen to the wise opinions of the cultivators of the Imperial Thunder sect and learn from them. Taoist Jingsu said faintly. Strange, why does Jingru have such a problem with my Imperial Thunder sect? Crazy Heaven was a little surprised. Although they are all cultivation sects of the Ming Kingdom, I've never heard of the Changbai faction and the Su Yen faction being close. However, seeing that everyone was looking at him, Crazy Heaven had to bite the bullet. Anyway, he usually talked nonsense, so he was not afraid to say more. I came to the Sky Patrol City. At this point, Crazy Heaven was delighted, as if he had thought of something. His speech became fluent, and he said, I carefully checked the situation of the battle between the Golden Core and the Illusory Sword. Sure enough, hard work pays off. This old man saw a habit of the sword cultivators in the formation. Actually, I don't know if any of you have noticed, but when the sword cultivators killed Clear Cave, where were they? At the north of the Sky Patrol City? Reverend Jingru was slightly stunned and replied. Yes, but when my Dao sect disciples went to Clear Cave, where was the target of the sword cultivators? Crazy Heaven asked again. It seems to be at Quanjin Mountain? Reverend Jingru was a little uncertain. No! It was at Chicken Crow Mountain. Crazy Heaven corrected him. It was under the circumstances where we disciples were not paying attention that they launched a surprise attack on Chicken Crow Mountain. Yes, Reverend Jingru actually did not understand what Crazy Heaven was talking about, and could only nod blankly. But when my Dao sect disciples went to Chicken Crow Mountain, Reverend Jingru, do you know where the sword cultivators went? Quanjin Mountain? Reverend Jingru probed again. Hee, Reverend Jingru, this Quanjin Mountain is quite famous, but before that, the sword cultivators harassed a few cultivation sects in the country of Shi. Of course, they only harassed and did not attack. What they really attacked were the strongholds of my Dao sect disciples. Crazy Heaven laughed. Crazy Heaven, if you have something to say, just say it. Sun Yunzi was a little impatient, and reminded him. Yes, senior brother Sun Yunzi. Crazy Heaven had always been respectful to Sun Yunzi. What I want to say is that the sword cultivators, who have never had any long-term strategies, suddenly grew up after this battle and actually tried to scheme against my Dao sect. However, this scheme is really short-sighted. It's just a diversion tactic. Tisk. Without waiting for Crazy Heaven to finish speaking, Baikonzi sneered and said, Reverend Crazy Heaven seems to have said this more than once today. Who do you think doesn't know? Yes. I thought you didn't know, that's why I mentioned it again and again. Crazy Heaven said with a serious face. Well, senior brother Sun Yunzi said it, so I said it clearly. Reverend Jade Sky, please don't interrupt me. You. Baikonzi was speechless. Say it. Sun Yunzi really wanted to beat the two of them up. Let me tell you, senior brother Xuanyun. I've noticed that when sword cultivators really attack a place, they always like to make a feint. They first attack another place, then attack the real target. And this real target is actually not what they want to attack. It's a mixture of truth and falsehood, They only reveal their ferocity at the last moment. Wasn't this large territory of the Lian country finally seized after many false and real attacks? Even the extremely powerful four-direction sword formation of the Sword Tomb was only a feint in the end. Junior brother Wu Ming of the Imperial Thunder sect had no choice but to let Lu Ruochang and the others go. After all, killing them at that time wouldn't have helped at all. Then, what about now? What does it have to do with us taking back the floating duckweed mountain? Taoist Jingxi said with interest. At this moment, the disciple of the Suyan school who went out to send the message returned. Behind him was an intermediate gold course stage disciple. Who else could it be other than Zhu Qinghe? When Zhu Qinghe entered the hall, he was about to bow and salute, but Sun Yunzi and the others were looking at Kuang Tian. He hesitated for a moment, then bowed slightly to everyone and walked to Bai Kongzi's side. Bai Kongzi looked at him and nodded slightly, then turned to look at Kuang Tian. Zhu Qinghe didn't dare to be negligent. After saluting respectfully, he stood behind Bai Kongzi, raised his head, and quietly listened to Taoist Crazy Heaven. Taoist Crazy Heaven naturally saw Zhu Qinghe come in, but he was disdainful. When he heard Taoist Jingxi's question, he asked curiously, "Senior brother Jingxi, I have been talking for so long. Don't you understand?" "I understand. Who doesn't know that it's a feint?" Taoist Jingxi smiled faintly. "This old man is not a 3-year-old child. How can I not understand? But the problem is, what kind of feint did the sword cultivator make in the floating duckweed mountain to do? Senior brother Jingxi, think about it. We are now in the Lian country. If the sword cultivator made a feint, he would definitely be in the Shi country, right? The Shi country is where our Tao sect's disciples are weaker. Wouldn't we fall into their trap?" Taoist Crazy Heaven gave a rare explanation. "Haven't you thought about it? Would the sword cultivator make a feint in the Lian country, and directly kill his way to the Sky Patrol City? What if he chased Taoist Master Shuiyu away from the Sky Patrol City?" "Sky Patrol City?" Taoist Jingxi was stunned. You said the sword cultivator wants to attack the Sky Patrol City? You're not joking, are you?" "Yes. This is the plan I have been thinking about for a long time." Taoist Crazy Heaven raised his eyebrows and said seriously, "The sword cultivator made such a big move in the Lian country. Isn't it to hide their intentions? Aren't they going to attack the Sky Patrol City? It's such a simple and obvious thing. Senior brother Jingxi, how can you not see it? In my opinion, senior brother should read more records of the war and experience the art of war." "Ha!" Taoist Jingxi laughed and pointed his finger. Crazy Heaven, this old man just wanted to see what you were going to say. I wanted to see how you were going to spout nonsense. But this old man really didn't expect that you would drag the Sky Patrol City into this. You didn't think about it. The Sky Patrol City is one of the top 10 cities in the Shi country. Over the years, there have been countless Tao sword wars. When has the sword cultivator ever plotted against the Sky Patrol City? So many sword cultivators in the past didn't dare to do it. Do the sword cultivators of today dare to do it? Do you think the sword cultivators of today are all muddle-headed and want to touch the walls of the Sky Patrol City? That's strange. Taoist Crazy Heaven sneered. Senior brother Jingxi, I've analyzed the situation of the war with the other senior brothers. You're saying that I'm wrong based on the fact that I didn't do it before. This doesn't seem appropriate. I just feel that the Sky Patrol City is very dangerous. It's because sword cultivators have always liked to use the diversion tactic. Tell me, what's your reason? What's your reason for saying that the Sky Patrol City is not dangerous? This old man has already said it. This old man only knows how to refine weapons and strategize. I'm not good at war. It's better for Marshal Nephew Zhu and the others to worry about such things. Taoist Jingxi pursed his lips and did not argue with Taoist Crazy Heaven. He turned to Zhu Qinghe and said, Marshal Nephew Zhu, come and explain it to your Marshal Uncle Crazy Heaven in detail. Zhu Qinghe bowed slightly and looked at Sun Yunzi and the others. He only smiled and did not speak. -11. Chapter 2831. Sun Yunzi was very satisfied with Zhu Qinghe's respect. He nodded and said, Nephew Zhu, you're our think tank. Since the beginning of the war, you've been giving advice. Tell me, is your Marshal Uncle Quangtian right? Zhu Qinghe took a step forward, bowed and said, Marshal uncles and Marshal Uncle Quangtian's worries are indeed reasonable. Moreover, We have already carefully analyzed and discussed this matter when we were at the battlefield. Ha ha ha, how is it? I've already said that I didn't waste my efforts to analyze the war situation for several days. Quang Tian was overjoyed and shouted unceremoniously. I'm much better than those people who sit in their positions without doing any work. Quang Tian's sitting in their positions without doing any work offended many people. Not only by Kongzi, who had some conflict with him before, but even Immortal Jingxi and the others were a little unhappy. Unfortunately, Quang Tian was looking at the sky and didn't look at them at all. His face was full of pride, and he didn't seem to care at all. It's just that. Xu Qinghe changed the topic and said with a smile, after thinking about it, although we can't rule out the possibility of an attack on the Sky Patrol City, it's not realistic to say that the Sky Patrol City is the purpose of this war. Oh? Why? Immortal Quang Tian raised his eyebrows and asked impatiently. Looking at Sun Yunzi and the others, they smiled. The people Xu Qinghe mentioned were 4 gold core stage cultivators. In addition to Xu Qinghe himself, there was Pan Dongmin, a middle stage gold core stage cultivator from the Blue Li sect of the Shi country, Du Yun, a late stage gold core stage cultivator from the Kunlun sect of the Lian country, and another gold core stage disciple from the Nanming sect of the Lian country. However, this disciple was only at the early stage of the gold core stage, and her name was Jiang Fian. Although these 4 people came from the 3 countries of cultivation and were from different sects, they had the same experience. They either participated in the last Taoist Sword War, or participated in the Taoist Demon War, or were good at planning in their sections. These 4 people were the think tanks of the Taoist sect cultivators in the Sword Tao War. All the initial plans in the Taoist Sword War were discussed by these 4 people, and then they were sent to the nascent Soul Stage Master for discussion in the conference hall. The conference hall would issue instructions. Since Xu Qinghe mentioned the matter about the Sky Patrol City and the 4 people had had a discussion, Sun Yunzi naturally knew that they had a plan, and was pleased. Marshal Uncle Quang Tian and uncles. Xu Qinghe was still very respectful. Before I came to the Sky Patrol City, I also read all the war's reports and I also found the sword cultivators often misuse the diversion tactic S's. When I learned that the sword often misuse the diversion tactic S's. When I heard if it was before the disappearance of the sword tomb, I would agree with Uncle Master Quang Tian's worries. The Sky Patrol City is really important. Once a sword cultivator occupies a Sky Patrol City, they control the entire situation from the Sky Patrol City to the Sword Tomb. The Sky Patrol City is like a sharp sword that pierces into the territory of our Dao sect cultivators. But now, the Sword Tomb's disappearance. Compared to before, the Huan countries, through the Sword Tombs, the Shi countries. Instead of attacking the Sky Patrol City, the sword cultivators might as well occupy the Lian country's territory. The Lian countries is bigger than the Sky Patrol cities, right? Oh? Immortal Quang Tian raised the corner of his mouth and said with a smile. If the sword tombs hadn't disappeared, the Sky Patrol cities would have been the sword cultivators' place. Even a wise man can make mistakes, and I've neglected the sword tombs matter. Bai Kongzi sneered and looked at Xu Qinghe. Xu Qinghe was not surprised. He smiled faintly and said, Marshal Uncle Quang Tian is right. Maybe the sword cultivators originally wanted to occupy the Sky Patrol City, but their plan could not keep up with the changes. The sword tombs disappeared, so they had no choice but to change their target again. Ha! That's right. These bastard sword cultivators are very cunning now. Immortal Quang Tian laughed. However, before Immortal Quang Tian could finish laughing, Xu Qinghe changed the topic and said, However, this is just a possibility. I've inferred from several aspects that the Sky Patrol cities can't be the sword cultivators' target. Is that so? Immortal Quang Tian's face instantly turned cold. He looked at Bai Kongzi, who was beside him, and said faintly, Tell me, why can't the Sky Patrol cities target? Firstly, the Sky Patrol cities is one of the top 10 cities in the Shi country. The Sky Patrol City's City Lord has been in charge of the Sky Patrol City for hundreds of thousands of years. Its foundation is not inferior to any cultivation sects. After so many years of repair and reinforcement, the snow and ice waves' great formation's ice waves formation not only did not fail due to the loss of the formation, but it's even stronger. Therefore, although Immortal Shuiyu's cultivation is only at the early nascent soul stage, he relies on the Sky Patrol City's strength is comparable to the middle nascent soul stage. Any transformation swordsman, even a third-grade transformation swordsman, can't gain any advantage when attacking the Sky Patrol City. Moreover, those transformation swordsmen are in danger of dying. Would a sword cultivator take the risk to attack such a dangerous place that doesn't have much strategic value? Secondly, without waiting for Immortal Quangtian to speak, Zhu Qinghe continued, I'm afraid Immortal Quangtian has forgotten about the teleportation formation of the Sky Patrol City. As long as there's a teleportation formation, Immortal Shuiyu and the disciples of the Sky Patrol City can freely enter and exit the Sky Patrol City and surprise the sword cultivators around the Sky Patrol City. Or they can send the Sky Patrol City's battle report to the nascent soul stage masters at any time. Do you think the Sky Patrol City can be easily defeated? Is there a third point? Sun Yunzi said with a smile. The teleportation formation is nothing, but the teleportation formation of the Sky Patrol City and Immortal Shuiyu are very difficult to deal with. I think it's very troublesome, let alone transformation swordsmen. The third point. Zhu Qinghe said with some embarrassment. Compared to the teleportation formation, it's not worth mentioning. Say it, I'm listening. Immortal Quangtian said coldly. Yes. Zhu Qinghe pondered for a while and said with a smile. Actually, I think that if the sword cultivators really set their target on the Sky Patrol City, they should have besieged the city at the beginning of the battle. They didn't have to wait until now. At that time, it was still a battle between the Golden Cord disciples and the Illusory Sword disciples. Hundreds of thousands of sword cultivators surrounded the Sky Patrol City so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. Immortal Shuiyu might not be able to make a move. If he were to make a move, transformation swordsmen would naturally make a move. Why go through so much trouble? Ha ha ha, not bad, not bad. Sun Yunzi clapped his hands and said, Nephew Zhu is right. I'm suddenly enlightened. No wonder the sword cultivators framed Nephew Zhu back then, but your Azure Sky Sect master defended it. He said that it must be the sword cultivators' plan to sow discord. If our Dao sect really did something to Nephew Zhu back then, how could there be such a far-sighted person to assist us nascent soul stage cultivators today? It's all Immortal Quangtian's praise. I don't dare to accept it. I've spent a lot of my mind on this, and I'm really not good at cultivation. Zhu Qinghe said with a smile. Ha ha ha, cultivation is nothing. You're a middle golden core stage cultivator, and you're comparable to several nascent soul stage cultivators. After this battle, the four of you will all have battle merits. Not only will your respective sects reward you, the entire Dao sect will also give you some benefits for your cultivation. However, it's just pregnancy, so it's nothing. Sun Yunzi laughed loudly. Thank you, Immortal Quangtian. I'll definitely come up with a plan for our Dao sect and exhaust my mind. I'll learn from Immortal Quangtian and other seniors. Zhu Qinghe bowed to express his gratitude. Immortal Quangtian pursed his lips and wanted to say something, but Zhu Qinghe's analysis was really comprehensive. All the assumptions were reasonable, and it was indeed the result of Zhu Qinghe and the others' long discussion. It was almost impeccable. At this moment, a figure appeared outside the hall again, and the sound of hurried footsteps came from outside. Then, at the entrance of the hall, another heavenly maniac appeared. However, everyone just raised their heads slightly, glanced at him, and ignored him. This heavenly maniac was naturally Qian Diheng of the Imperial Thunder sect. Not only did Qian Diheng look similar to heavenly maniac, but his behavior was also extremely similar. At this time, in the skyscraping hall, there were only nascent soul stage cultivators, and only Zhu Qinghe was a golden core stage cultivator. Moreover, this golden core stage cultivator was sent in by Bai Kongzi. However, Qian Diheng was now only a middle foundation establishment stage disciple, but he swaggered in and out of the skyscraping hall as if he was not restricted at all. Moreover, looking at the several late foundation establishment stage disciples guarding the entrance, they actually nodded slightly when they saw Qian Diheng, which was rare, and did not stop him. They seemed to be very familiar with Qian Diheng. After Qian Diheng entered the skyscraping hall, he immediately restrained himself like Zhu Qinghe. He walked quickly to Sun Yunzi and the others, bowed and said, "Junior Qian Diheng greets the ancestors." "Well, get up." Sun Yunzi's eyes flashed with a trace of impatience as he said lightly. Heavenly Maniac said with a smile, "Hunger, you have worked hard in the fierce battle just now. Why don't you take a rest later? You are only a middle foundation establishment stage cultivator. Although you have the spirit of sacrificing yourself for our Dao sect, your body is also important." Tisk, Bai Kongzi was naturally not as arrogant as Heavenly Maniac, but he still snorted coldly. Yes, Qian Diheng had not spoken yet, but Heavenly Maniac had already praised him so much, as if the whole Dao sect had to take Qian Diheng as a role model. However, Qian Diheng was only a middle foundation establishment stage cultivator. How much strength could he have? How much strength could he contribute to the Dao sect? "I will let you know, ancestor," Qian Diheng said with a smile. "Boy's cultivation is not high, but boy has the world in his heart. He will definitely do his best to defeat the sword cultivators of our Dao sect and drive those trashy sword cultivators out of the Lian country." Good. Heavenly Maniac clapped his hands and said, "Our Dao sect's cultivators are all as heroic as you. Why should we worry about not accomplishing great things?" -11. Chapter 2832. Sun Yunzi felt a headache coming on. He missed the time when he was with Qian Lazy. He really couldn't figure out when the thunder-controlling sect, which had always considered itself a big sect, had so many thick-skinned disciples. However, this boy came here today because he has extremely important news to report to Ancestor. Qian Diheng changed the topic and said proudly, "This news is extremely important to our sect. It can be said that it has an immeasurable effect on the war situation." "Ah? Is that so?" Master Guangzi was overjoyed. His face, which had just been slapped, was now glowing. He hurriedly shouted, say it, haha, ancestor, ancestor," Qian Diheng said with a smile. "Sword cultivators have worked so hard to attack the territory of the country of Xi and the country of Lian. They even controlled several cultivation sects and families in the country of Lian and occupied many territories of our sect. But, ancestor, do you know the true purpose of sword cultivators? Also, why are they in such a hurry to start this war of swords?" Hearing this, Zhu Qinghe was slightly stunned and turned to look at Bai Kongzi. Bai Kongzi's face was also somewhat unsightly. Instead, Immortal Jingru looked at Sun Yunzi and the others and said with a smile, "Qian Diheng, you seem to have said it too late. If you had come earlier, you would have known that after our discussion, we have confirmed it. The purpose of sword cultivators' war this time is Sentry City." "Ah?" Qian Diheng was stunned and stammered. "You... How did you know?" "Ha ha ha ha!" Sun Yunzi, Bai Kongzi and the others couldn't help but laugh. Even Immortal He Ping, who had been silent all this time, couldn't help but laugh out loud. Although Zhu Qinghe didn't laugh, it was obvious that he couldn't help laughing. Immortal Quangtian didn't laugh, but coldly glanced at the crowd. Immortal Miyu's face was a little red, and she stared hard at Qian Diheng. "Of course we know!" Immortal Jingru added fuel to the fire. "Sword cultivators are obviously creating a diversion. Which cultivator doesn't know?" You also received Xiaohua's." "Oh no, it's the first task force of the conference hall's message?" Qian Diheng was stunned at first, but when he looked at Immortal He Ping, he immediately realized it. "What? Xiaohua? The first special task force of the meeting hall?" When Crazy Heaven heard this, His eyes flashed with joy, and he hurriedly asked, Quickly take out the message! Old ancestor, don't you already have one? Qian Diheng asked in a daze. Humph, don't listen to their nonsense. Crazy Heaven said coldly. Only Xiao Hua of my Imperial Thunder Sect can deliver such important news. Then, he glanced at Jinren Heiping and added, Only the first task force in the conference hall can send it here. Immortal Heiping's face lit up, and his eyes fell on Qian Diheng. As for Taoist calm consideration and Zhu Qinghe, the joy in their eyes was even stronger than the others. Yes, although Qian Diheng was somewhat confused, he still hurriedly took out the message talisman that Xiao Hua asked Jiu Xia to send over and respectfully handed it over to Taoist Kuang Tian. Crazy Heaven took the message talisman, but he didn't check it. Instead, he turned around and handed it to Reverend Miyu, saying, Senior brother, this is a message from my Imperial Thunder Sect's disciple who risked his life to send. Please make a decision. Reverend Miyu nodded slightly, took the message talisman, and checked it with her divine sense. Her face lit up with joy, and she handed the message talisman to Sun Yunzi, saying with a smile, Senior brother Sun Yunzi, this is a message from my Imperial Thunder Sect's Xiao Hua. It's the most secretive news of this sword battle. Of course, although Xiao Hua is a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect, he's also a member of the first special task force of the meeting hall. His message is naturally a message from the first special task force. Hearing this, Reverend Heiping nodded slightly and asked, Where did Zongbao and the others go? I heard from Hengyu that they seemed to want to make a new contribution, so they went to the Sword Tomb. All right, Senior Brother Heiping, you know. Reverend Miyu smiled. Although the message talisman didn't mention Li Zongbao, Xiao Mao, and the others, since Xiao Hua went to Mount Meng and discovered the secret of sword cultivators, then Li Zongbao and the others must be there. What? Mount Meng? Reverend Jingyu was stunned, and even Zhu Qinghe was a little dumbfounded. However, it was only for a moment, and Zhu Qinghe's eyes revealed a trace of understanding. Sun Yunzi took the message talisman and looked at it. His face revealed a look of astonishment, but then he was a little puzzled. He looked at everyone and said, Martial Nephew Zhu, take a look first. As for the other junior brothers, listen to Qian Diheng's report. Yes, this disciple understands. Zhu Qinghe looked at the message talisman flying toward him and reached out to catch it. However, he was not in a hurry to read it. Instead, he looked at the message talisman over and over again, frowning and pondering for a moment. Only then did he immerse his divine sense into it. Just as Zhu Qinghe was reading it, Qian Diheng respectfully told him everything that Xiao Hua knew. In the end, he said, Honorable Masters, Xiao Hua is only a disciple around the middle stage of foundation establishment. His cultivation base is even lower than mine, but he was willing to take a great risk and break through the Sword Tomb. He even crossed the Huan country and went deep into the mysterious Mount Meng to find out such hidden information. This kind of contribution, even my Honorable Master Wu Ming of the Imperial Thunder Sect can't compare. This disciple is not talented, but I must ask for a reward for junior brother Xiao. That's right. Xiao Hua's talent can be seen by heaven and earth. Xiao Hua's heart shines like the sun and moon. My Imperial Thunder Sect's Xiao Hua, a foundation establishment disciple, is comparable to a dozen nascent soul cultivators. Kuang Tian was also overjoyed. He clapped his hands and said, This old man admits that, not to mention the past, even now, I don't have this kind of courage and this kind of wit. Hearing this, Reverend Miyu smiled. Xiao Hua was a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect. Even if Kuang Tian said that he was not as good as Xiao Hua, he wouldn't care. However, Kuang Tian directly used Sun Yunzi's words and said that dozens of nascent soul cultivators were not as good as Xiao Hua. Sun Yunzi, Reverend Heiping, and the others were naturally included in the list. Reverend Heiping was considered cultured, but Sun Yunzi was already unhappy. Kuang Tian, Sun Yunzi said lightly. Although the first task force led by Li Zongbao is praiseworthy, not only did they kill sword cultivator Qin Jian in the first stage of the battle, but they also saved the disciples of other sects many times. However, in the second stage of the battle, we didn't agree to let them go deep into the Huan country. They are just foundation establishment disciples. How could they have the strength to enter and exit the sword tomb? To put it nicely, they are lone heroes. To put it bluntly, they are people who like to achieve great things. Fellow Taoist Sun Yunzi, Reverend He Ping said lightly, although the disciples don't have the strength, it is already very good that they have such a heroic heart. Junior brother He Ping, Sun Yunzi said with a smile. I don't mean to blame them. I just think they're too arrogant. Alas, forget it. I won't say anything more. Let's listen to junior nephew Zhu's opinion first. At this time, Zhu Qinghe had already read Xiao Hua's messaging charm. He bowed and handed it to Kuang Tian. He stood there with a smile, quietly listening to Sun Yunzi and the others. Seeing that Sun Yunzi asked him, he bowed and said, I have already read the messaging charm. Martial uncles and martial uncles already know what is inside. I just want to ask martial nephew Qian a few questions. Of course. Ask quickly. Reverend Kuang Tian's divine sense entered the messaging charm and carefully checked it, but he said with a smile, Martial Uncle Zhu, please ask. Qian Dihing bowed and replied, This messaging charm. How did you receive it? Which sect's disciple sent it? Or did you directly fly in from outside Sehua mountain range? Zhu Qinghe asked. Naturally. Qian Dihing said curiously, but before he could finish, his face changed greatly. Yes, when he received the messaging charm and saw that it was from Xiao Hua, he was naturally overjoyed. Moreover, when he looked at the news inside, he was even more shocked. He didn't think carefully and hurriedly ran to report it. Now that Zhu Qinghe asked, he understood. If Xiao Hua came back by himself, then he must have come back by himself. Why would he send a messaging charm? But if Xiao Hua didn't come back by himself, then who sent it? If it was a Dao sect disciple, how did they come back from Huan country? Why didn't they meet Qian Dihing? One had to know that the message in the message talisman was too important. But since it wasn't him, then who sent it? Qian Dihing regretted his recklessness. If he could wait half a day and wait for Reverend Kuang Tian and Reverend Liu to return, wouldn't it be better for him to report alone? However, the expression on Qian Diheng's face changed slightly, and he immediately said with a smile, Naturally, it was a disciple of my Imperial Thunder sect who sent it. Then, Qian Diheng looked at Reverend Kuang Tian and said, Old ancestor, that disciple called Quan Jin received a messaging charm from another disciple near the sword tomb and didn't dare to neglect it. He hurriedly sent it to the front. Oh yes, this Quan Jin is very useful. Reverend Kuang Tian nodded slightly. If he is still in Sehua mountain range, this old man will reward him heavily in a while. Quan Jin has already returned to the sword tomb. There are still many reports to be analyzed and transmitted. How can he stay here for long? Qian Diheng replied without leaving a trace. Yes. The Imperial Thunder Sect's transmission is so good, this Shu really admires it. Zhu Qinghe said with a smile, then said to Sun Yunzi, Since this messaging charm didn't fly in from outside, but was sent by a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect through his own channels, then this messaging charm should belong to martial nephew Xiao Hua without a doubt. This messaging charm originally belonged to Xiao Hua. Qian Diheng rolled his eyes at Zhu Qinghe, as if he didn't treat him as a golden core martial uncle. Since we can rule out this messaging charm from a sword cultivator, I would like to ask martial nephew Qian, is there only Xiao Hua's messaging charm? Why is there no messaging charm for Li Zongbao, Xiao Mao, or Kai Hongxia? If your Imperial Thunder Sect's communication channels are so good, shouldn't their messaging charms also be sent? -11. Chapter 2833. They naturally have their own channels. Why use my Imperial Thunder Sects? Qian Diheng didn't back down and replied, Uncle Master He Ping, can the Utopia faction send the message talisman from millions of Ming mountains? Zhu Qinghe turned and asked Reverend He Ping. The Immortal He Ping shook his head slightly. The Utopia faction is not as far-sighted as the Imperial Thunder faction. We don't have such a plan. Well, since the Utopia faction doesn't have it then, Li Zhongbao's message charm should be sent here with the disciples of the Imperial Thunder faction, right? Zhu Qinghe nodded and said, even if Martial Nephew Li Zhongbao doesn't want to write a messaging talisman, shouldn't Martial Nephew Li Zhongbao's messaging talisman have left a message? They should have even mentioned Martial Nephew Li Zhongbao, right? But why did Li Zhongbao, Xiao Mao, and Kai Hongxia not mention a single word in this message talisman? How would I know? Qian Dihing said unhappily. I didn't write this messaging talisman. Then Martial Nephew Qian, I'll ask you another question. Zhu Qinghe didn't force him and asked again. Do you think that Li Zhongbao, Xiao Mao, Kai Hongxia and Xiao Hua, these 4 Foundation establishment disciples, can easily break through the Sword Cultivator's blockade? Would they be able to safely pass through the encirclement of the Huan Kingdom's swordsmen? Would they be able to avoid the battle between the Soul Cultivators and the Sword Cultivators? To be able to easily explain the situation of the battle between the Soul Cultivators and the Sword Cultivators, and to find out the source of the battle? Putting aside everything else, do you think Xiao Hua and the others can understand the uncivilized language of millions of Ming mountains? This? Qian Dihing stuttered. How would I know? Left and right, Xiao Hua and the others have already rushed past the Sword Catacomb, passed through the Huan Kingdom, and arrived at Mount Meng. Martial Nephew Qian, how could you not know? Your sect's disciple was able to send the messaging talisman all the way from Huan State to the Sword Tomb, and then through the Sword Tomb to the Chui Hua mountain range. How could you not know how Xiao Hua got there? That's right, when Xiao Hua and the others went I hadn't come yet. How do I know how they passed through the Sword Tomb with my Imperial Thunder sect's disciples? Qian Dihing's words were somewhat unreasonable. Martial Nephew Qian, if this message talisman was sent by your sect's martial Uncle Wu, then it would be quite valuable. Zhu Qinghe shook his head slightly and said earnestly. But it just so happened that it was sent by a middle-stage Foundation establishment disciple. This message talisman has no value at all. If you really want to give it a price, then it's beneficial to the Sword Cultivators. It's the Sword Cultivators' plan to deceive the heavens and cross the sea, their plan to lure the enemy. As a matter of fact, even without Zhu Qinghe saying the last sentence, Sun Yunzi and the others had already come to a conclusion. Putting aside the fact that Xiao Hua, a late-stage Foundation establishment disciple, was unlikely to be able to pass through the Sword Tomb and find out the secret that even nascent soul cultivators could not find out, Qian Dihing could not explain how the communication talisman was sent back from the millions of Ming mountains, and none of them could believe it. How is this possible? Qian Dihing retorted. If it was a sword cultivator's scheme, how could it have so many flaws? They can do as they please. What flaw? Zhu Qinghe said with a smile. I never said there was a flaw. I'm only saying that if it has any value, then it's a sword cultivator's trick. Oh? Or do you also think that this communication talisman is a sword cultivator's trap? Although Qian Dihing was arrogant and witty, he was still speechless in front of people like Zhu Qinghe. He opened his mouth, but there was no way he could refute. Of course, if you can answer my questions just now, I'd rather believe that this communication talisman was sent by the real Xiao Hua. This is Xiao Hua's communication talisman. Quan Tianan sneered. Actually, Zhu Qinghe pondered for a while, then said calmly, I know that all the martial uncles and martial uncles are still a little skeptical about this matter. And you all value Xiao Hua's communication talisman very much. How about this? I won't hide it anymore, and I'll reveal it to all the seniors. Even if this message talisman is real, this message is useless. Everything has already been taken into consideration when the juniors were discussing. In other words, I really hope that this news is true, and that the sword cultivator's target is Sky Patrol City, and not anywhere else. Oh? You've said it all. Just now, I said that Sky Patrol City is the sword cultivator's target, and you said that it's absolutely not. Now that Xiaohua's communication talisman is here, you're saying that this is all within your calculations? Quan Tianan exclaimed exaggeratedly. It's like this, Marshal Uncle Quan Tianan. Xu Qinghe said faintly. When we withdrew from Sky Patrol City, we went to the city governor's mansion to see Marshal Uncle Shuiyu, and explained the matter clearly to him. If the sword cultivators attacked Sky Patrol City, he would immediately use the transmission formation and send a disciple of the late-stage Gold Core realm to send a message. He just needs to hold on for a while, and the disciples of our True Path sect will come back to help. A while? Quan Tianan sneered. Can you return to Sky Patrol City in a while? Haha, Marshal Uncle Quan Tianan, this is just 1,000 miles away from Sky Patrol City. There are a few martial uncles. Xu Qinghe smiled and stopped talking. Good. When Sun Yunzi heard this, his face lit up and he almost stood up. He clapped his hands and said, I see, no wonder there are a few Taoists who have been missing for a long time. It turns out that they are here. What if the transmission formation is also destroyed by the sword cultivators? Quan Tianan seemed to be unwilling to give up and was determined to get to the bottom of this. Xu Qinghe had obviously thought about it and said with a smile, There are two types of transmission formations in Sky Patrol City. One is fixed and the other is not fixed. If the sword cultivators want to besiege the city, they must be very close to it. Although the transmission formation with a fixed location can only transport a few people, the distance is long and the sword cultivators can't detect it. Quan Tianan, look! Marshal Nephew Zhu and the others have thought it through. Even if this communication talisman is real, the sword cultivators are nothing to be afraid of. The news from Sky Patrol City has spread, and a few of our True Path sect's nascent soul realm cultivators have entered Sky Patrol City to assist Marshal Uncle Shuiyu. Or they can attack from the inside and outside with Marshal Uncle Shuiyu, and we can surround them. This war will be over? Sun Yunzi said with a smile. That's right, junior brother Quan Tianren. Jinlin Jingru echoed. Even if the sword cultivators capture Sky Patrol City, our True Path sect's nascent soul realm cultivators gather outside Sky Patrol City, won't they be surrounded? Won't that be like catching a turtle in a jar? Ha ha ha, that's right, Bai Kongzi said with a bright smile. Jinren Quan Tianren looked embarrassed. When it came to troop deployment, he was not as good as Xu Qinghe and the others. However, he still did not forget to say, No matter what, this is a message from the disciples of Imperial Thunder Sect. Oh, there are also disciples of Utopia Faction, Xunyan School and Huanhua Sect. We can't ignore their contributions. That's right. Xu Qinghe nodded and cupped his hands at Sun Yunzi. Uncle Sun Yunzi, Xiaohua and the others have made great contributions. This has already been recorded in the merit book. Moreover, this message talisman has alerted me. If what Xiaohua said is true and the soul cultivators and sword cultivators are fighting, where did the swordsmen of Huan country get their appetite from? Is there a great change in their Huan country? Uncle Sun Yunzi, please send some capable disciples to Huan country and even Million Mountains to take a look. Sun Yunzi was a little impatient when he heard that Xiaohua and the others had to record their contributions. However, when he heard that they still had to send disciples to Huan country and Million Mountains, Sun Yunzi frowned even more and said, Now that the sword tomb is open, it's extremely difficult for us True Path sect disciples to pass through. Ordinary disciples will only be courting death. Moreover, it's even more difficult to cross Huan country. Even if we found out that the soul cultivators and sword cultivators are fighting, then wouldn't we know it now? But Junior still wants to know the reason. This is very important for this battle, Xu Qinghe said with a smile. If there's really a great change in Huan country, our 3 cultivation kingdoms won't need to force them too much. The sword cultivators will retreat without fighting. All right. Sun Yunzi nodded. We'll do as nephew says. At this point, Xu Qinghe raised his eyebrows and looked at Quangtian Taoist. Uncle Quangtian, speaking of battle achievements, this junior has something to ask you. Speak, Quangtian Taoist answered casually. Yes, Xu Qinghe said with a smile. I presume that Uncle Quangtian and Uncle Miyu don't have any objections that this jade slip was sent by your noble sex Xiaohua, right? Of course. Quangtian Taoist nodded without hesitation. Good. Since it's news from your noble sex disciple, then this news has to be of some value, Xu Qinghe said with a smile. When we were discussing that day, we felt that, well, Uncle Quangtian seemed to have mentioned it just now, it's not safe enough to ambush a few Uncle Masters outside the city. Junior actually wanted to quietly ambush a few nascent soul masters inside the city. However, I haven't been able to find a suitable teacher. Now that Xiaohua from your sect has sent the message, and your sect fully believes in this matter, then, can I invite the disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect to go to the Sky Patrol City and resist the siege of the Sword Cultivators with the disciples of the Sky Patrol City? When Quangtian Taoist heard this, his expression changed greatly, and he unconsciously looked at Miyu. Oh, Martial Uncle Miyu, this is a great contribution, Xu Qinghe said with a smile. If the Sword Cultivators really want to attack the Sky Patrol City, then the Sky Patrol City will be a bait to lure the Sword Cultivators there. The Masters will resist the attack of the Sword Cultivators there and cooperate with the Masters to defeat the Sword Cultivators outside the Sky Patrol City. This is a story that will last for eternity. But if the Sword Cultivators really want to attack the Sky Patrol City, then they must have full confidence. We're just a few nascent soul cultivators, Quangtian Taoist said coldly. Uncle Quangtian, if you don't go, won't Senior Shuiyu be even lonelier? Since Senior thinks that the Sword Cultivators want to attack the Sky Patrol City, then all the more reason to fight with the Sword Cultivators in the Sky Patrol City, Xu Qinghe said with a smile. Of course, if Uncle Master thinks that this news is not from Xiaohua, but a trick of the Sword Cultivators, then going to the Sky Patrol City would be a waste of time, then just pretend that I never said this. Xu Qinghe's words were really harsh and immediately pushed Quangtian Taoist into a dilemma. -11. Chapter 2834. Crazy Heaven Taoist thought for a moment and was about to answer, but Immortal Miyu shook her head and said, I don't think it's appropriate, so… Fellow Miyu also found out that this messaging charm is fake? Sun Yunzi said with a smile. Immortal Miyu's expression changed slightly, but at this time, Crazy Heaven Taoist transmitted a few words to her. Immortal Miyu hesitated for a moment and reluctantly said, This messaging charm is naturally real. How about this? Imperial Thunder Sect is willing to go to Sky Patrol City to support Immortal Shuiyu, but we still need 2 sects to go with us. Xu Qinghe refused without hesitation. Uncle, if 2 sects are not enough, at most, I'll discuss with others and send another sect. Because we don't think that Sky Patrol City will be the target, so we can't invest too much power. Oh. Okay. Immortal Miyu bit her lips and nodded hesitantly. Sun Yunzi did not understand Xu Qinghe's thoughts, but since the disciples of Imperial Thunder Sect were sent to Sky Patrol City, they would not have any military achievements in the second stage, so he was a little happy. By the way, Qinghe, I haven't asked you before. Thinking of this, Baikonzi glanced at Immortal Maniac proudly and said to Xu Qinghe, After listening to you for half a day, my martial uncles and uncles are all a bit confused. Tell me, what is the real goal of sword cultivators? A few old rivals from the last Taoist sword war, such as Cheng Minghua from Bright Sword Sect and Chong Taishu from Void Heaven Sword School, have all disappeared? Xu Qinghe nodded confidently and said, Actually, we don't know where the real goal of the sword cultivators is. However, according to our speculation, if the goal of the sword cultivators here is not the Spirit Stone Vein, then it should be one of the Qiming Ridge, Xunyu Mountain, and Qihong River Basin of Lian Country. Qiming Ridge, Xunyu Mountain, and Qihong River? Not only Sun Yunzi, but even Baikonzi was stunned. Everyone was silent for a moment before asking tentatively. These 3 places are all in the northeast of the Lian Country. After the war started, the sword cultivators have never attacked them. Moreover, from Huan Country to these places, there are natural barriers. Even if one transformed into a sword, it would not be easy to pass through. Why did they occupy those places? Spiritual Master He Ping frowned slightly and said in surprise, I remember. The place Martial Nephew Zhu mentioned has an extremely cold climate. Moreover, there are some spirit stone veins there. However, those spirit stone veins are extremely small. Even the sects in the state of Shi don't care about them. Only a few small cultivation families are there. Zhu Qinghe continued. Actually, we're more inclined towards the sword cultivator's goal. In terms of spirit stone veins, floating Duckweed Mountain has only been occupied by sword cultivators for a few days. From top to bottom, from inside to outside, floating Duckweed Mountain is as clean as a dog's lick. All the spirit stones, medicinal pills, and spirit herbs were gone. Not a single one was left. It could be seen how much sword cultivators yearn for these things. However, if we really take a step back and settle for the second best, the three places I mentioned are quite similar to Huan country in terms of climate, spirit stones, and territory. If sword cultivators want to occupy them, it must be one of them. There's one more thing, which is what the martial uncles and martial uncles have said before. Sword cultivators are the best at creating a diversion. They've been bluffing back and forth between the Lian country and the Shi country so that we'll focus our attention on them and ignore the bitter cold. This way, they will have a chance to take advantage of it. Then what should we do? Bai Kongzi was a little anxious. We wait, haha, don't worry, sect master, Zhu Qinghe said with a smile. We're attacking floating Duckweed Mountain, but there are already disciples patrolling the vicinity of these three places. Moreover, there are also senior brothers in the late stage of Gold Core guarding them. While Zhu Qinghe was talking, a Foundation establishment disciple hurriedly walked in from outside the hall. He held up a message talisman and said, Reporting to Grandmaster Sun Yunzi, there's an urgent message from Nanming sect, give it to me. Sun Yunzi grabbed, and the message talisman flew into his hand. When Sun Yunzi checked it with his divine sense, a trace of astonishment appeared in his eyes. He looked at Zhu Qinghe in disbelief and said, Martial Nephew Zhu, you are really amazing. This is a message from Nanming sect. They received a message from a patrolling disciple that they found traces of a large number of swordsmen in Yu Mountain. I'm afraid those old swordsmen that fellow Taoist Bai Kongzi mentioned are there. Good, Zhu Qinghe clapped his hands and said, Since we found traces of them, it's easy to handle. We've already discussed this matter. We just need to act according to the previous arrangement. Then, Zhu Qinghe began to mobilize the troops. Beside him, Spiritual Master Kuangtian looked at Qian Diheng and asked in a low voice, Where did you get this message talisman? Alas, old ancestor, it's almost the same as old Zhu's guess. It flew in from outside. Qian Diheng naturally wouldn't hide it from Spiritual Master Kuangtian and said, But this message talisman is definitely Xiaohua's. Alas, Xiaohua is in danger. Spiritual Master Kuangtian sighed. I wanted to come to the battlefield to protect him, but I haven't seen him yet. Qian Diheng's face was also gloomy. He had been looking for Xiaohua since he came to Sky Patrol City. Who knew that Xiaohua was even more mysterious than he imagined? Almost no one in Thunder-controlling sect had seen him before. He was even more mysterious than the mysterious terrifying Phoenix and nascent soul Wu Ming. It was a pity that Xiaohua's cultivation was too shallow, and Qian Diheng had never seen Xiaohua's Phoenix celestial body. Otherwise, he would have placed the terrifying Phoenix and nascent soul Wu Ming on Xiaohua. In the past, no news was the best news because Qian Diheng thought that Xiaohua was still alive in this world. But now, there was news, and it was bad news. Almost everyone in the hall was certain that Xiaohua must have fallen into the hands of sword cultivators. Otherwise, his message talisman would not have been sent back. On the contrary, because there was no news about Li Zongbao, Xiao Mao, and Fairy Hong Xia, everyone felt that they were safe. Xiaohua did not expect such a self-defeating plan. As for Jiu Xia, she did think of it, but Xiaohua did not tell her too much. She only needed to send the message talisman. How many Dao sect cultivators died? Would Jiu Xia care? Since this message talisman is fake, Qian Diheng's eyes turned slightly, looking at the expressions of Zhu Qinghe and the others, and said to Spiritual Master Kuang-Tian, "How can we go to Sky Patrol City? Wouldn't we fall into the sword cultivator's trap?" Why not?" Spiritual Master Kuang-Tian laughed. "The sword cultivator's trick has been seen through by us, so they naturally won't pay attention to Sky Patrol City. The most dangerous place is also the safest. My thunder-controlling sect disciples will be safe there, Qian Diheng also laughed, but there was a different meaning in the corner of his mouth. Xiaohua, who had been silently mourned by Qian Diheng, was sitting on the back of the green witch feather, accompanying Fairy Hongxia. He released his divine sense, looking at the withered yellow all over the mountains, and was deep in thought. The back of the green witch feather was quite spacious, and it was very stable. Sitting cross-legged in the usual posture of a cultivator, it was very comfortable. However, even Fairy Hongxia, who was accompanying Xiaohua, had a trace of worry on her face. Yes, the millions of Ming Mountains were really in an abyss of suffering. Previously, Xiaohua and the others did not feel it, and only felt that what they saw in Nianlu Stockade was shocking enough. However, after flying for more than 10 days on the back of the green witch feather, they had passed many barren places, passed many barren wastelands, seen in the desolate night wind, starving aborigines, white bones everywhere, and even scenes of cannibalism. Only now did they understand that Nianlu Stockade was really insignificant compared to these places. It was no wonder that old Wu said proudly that Nianlu Stockade was much better than other places under his precautionary measures. In Xiaohua's dimension, all the puppets were planting millet seeds. Batches of millet seeds were being produced continuously, but Xiaohua did not dare to spread these millet seeds out easily. On one hand, these millet seeds were the key to Xiao Mao's control of the millions of Ming Mountains in the future, and to gain the recognition of the aborigines. Xiaohua could not release these millet seeds at will, as it would ruin Xiao Mao's future. On the other hand, Xiaohua was not sure if these millet seeds would take root and germinate, and they would grow into longevity millet seeds. Instead of wasting them so easily, he would rather give them to Nianlu Stockade and let them grow millet seeds. "Xiaohua, the millions of Ming Mountains are really pitiful." Fairy Hongxia could not help but sigh, and her tone of bemoaning the state of the universe and pitying the fate of mankind was very similar to Shui Shui's. "Alas, there's nothing we can do about it." Xiaohua looked under the soul beast, and saw a few skinny corpses that had died of starvation. It was unclear whether they were children or adults. He sighed and said, "You haven't seen the famine in Ming country and other places, it's similar to here. The millions of aborigines of Ming Mountains, although they look pitiful, but they are still different from us. The secular people of the 3 cultivation countries are the same as us. If you see them, you will be even more heartbroken." "Daoist Xiao, what's going on?" Fairy Hongxia finally asked after hesitating for dozens of days. "It's all because of those secular people." Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, "Your husband gave them some fine seeds that I picked up, and they thought that your husband was a deity, and directly called me Daoist Xiao. Your husband couldn't explain it, so I just didn't explain it. But I didn't expect that. Xiao Mao, that bastard, would not want such a great merit, and insist on dragging your husband into it. Xiao Mao doesn't want the millions of people of Meng Mountains to forget your grace." Fairy Hongxia pursed her lips and said, "In the future, he should be able to become a commander, and the grace of these people will be indispensable. Sharing some with you is nothing. Besides, these seeds were originally picked up by you." Fairy Hongxia's elbow naturally turned to Xiaohua's side. "Let's not talk so much." Xiaohua waved his hand and asked, "How far is this place from your Kai clan's ancestral hall? If the direction is correct, we should be able to reach it in another 10 days. Fairy Hongxia said. "After all, the millions of Meng Mountains have undergone a great change, and the records in the Jade Amulet are no longer valid. If not for Chia Chi, that aborigine, leading the way, and letting him go down and ask, I'm afraid that it would be difficult for us to find this place." -11. Chapter 2835. That's right. This is your good luck, Jie Qi's good luck, and Xiao Mao's good luck. Xiao Hua was very familiar with the way of karma. After saying a few words, he closed his eyes and said, Your husband has always been unfamiliar with this path. I can't even bear to witness the miserable state of my body. It's better for your husband to cultivate. After saying that, Xiao Hua took out the reward that Jiu Xia gave him in advance from the space. Jiu Xia clearly stated that one was the method to strengthen the primordial spirit, which was different from the cultivation methods of the three kingdoms. The other was the divination technique that she was good at. Xiao Hua hesitated for a moment before choosing the method to strengthen the primordial spirit. The forging of pressure had always been a sore point in his heart. He urgently needed a secret technique to make up for this shortcoming. As for the divination technique, although Xiao Hua was very curious and wanted to know if this divination technique was related to his karma hand, he also understood that this secret technique was definitely not something that could be comprehended in a short period of time. He could only wait for his primordial spirit to be free in the space before he could comprehend it. After immersing his divine sense into the jade pendant, Xiao Hua was stunned. The front of the jade pendant wasn't filled with ordinary characters. Instead, it was filled with characters that were similar to green seal characters. These characters actually took up the majority of the jade pendant. Only a small portion at the back was filled with characters that he was familiar with. Moreover, from the green seal text, it could be seen that the words inside were also incomplete. However, Xiao Hua looked at the last part of the chant, then looked at the words in front of it, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. This was because he recognized the characters on the jade pendant. It was the same as the characters on the jade pendant that he won from Yan Xiefeng in Thunder Mountain Range. However, that jade pendant recorded the unknown divine flame technique, while this one was the incomplete sun shrouding technique. Sun shrouding technique? Hee, interesting. Xiao Hua laughed in his heart. The primordial spirit is like a candle. This secret technique actually claims to be able to forge the primordial spirit to the point of covering the sun. This is really a bit exaggerated. Xiao Hua didn't directly look at the final chant, but instead looked at the true record of the jade pendant. As Xiao Hua slowly comprehended it, the smile on his face gradually disappeared and was replaced by astonishment. A kind of unimaginable feeling filled his mind. This cultivation technique is truly miraculous. It can actually use such an unimaginable method to temper the primordial spirit. What Reverend Brightsword's divine sense splitting technique, what Li Xiubai's primordial spirit strengthening technique, compared to this sun shrouding art, they all pale in comparison. No, they can't even be mentioned in the same breath. They are simply not on the same level. Jiu Xia, oh Jiu Xia, who are you? Where did you come from? If an ordinary primordial spirit strengthening technique is already so rare, then what about divination? The more precious the sun shrouding art was, the more Xiao Hua understood that Jiu Xia's origins were extraordinary. He also knew that Jiu Xia definitely didn't want to obtain anything from him. What Jiu Xia said was all true. Immediately, Xiao Hua immersed himself in comprehending it. After a few days, the cultivation technique became more and more profound and couldn't be easily comprehended. Xiao Hua took advantage of the time to look at the later part of the chant. The latter part of the chant was simple. It was a part of the sun shrouding art. However, the name of the chant wasn't stated. There were even many notes in the chant that others had comprehended. Xiao Hua carefully looked at it, and knew that Jiu Xia didn't hide anything. The explanation and translation of the chant were very consistent with the sun shrouding art. However, because the text was different, many details of the sun shrouding art couldn't be reflected in the chant. Of course, those notes could also provide a lot of comprehension and could be considered very precious. After comprehending it, Xiao Hua came to a realization. Alas, such a precious thing is given to me so easily. Then what Jiu Xia wants me to do, isn't it more difficult than stopping the war between the soul cultivators and sword cultivators? Xiao Hua sighed. The jade pendant in his hand immediately became incomparably hot. In fact, he himself was also baffled that he could stop the war between the soul cultivators and sword cultivators. At this time, well, maybe he really did stop it in the end. He didn't do much. He just dug up some millet seeds from the ground, planted them in the space, and then took them out. It was about the same as taking out his own space. However, what Jiu Xia wanted to do in the future would definitely not be so simple. Why is it so hot? With Xiaohua's cultivation, he had long been immune to cold and heat. However, at this time, when his imagination was running wild, he suddenly felt that the weather was a little abnormal. When Xiaohua opened his eyes, sure enough, there was an indescribable heat wave near the green shaman feather. Although the sun had just risen, the scorching sunlight was like a fire burning in the air. Looking at the ground again, although it was dry and yellow, there was always some vegetation and even some wild animals. However, here, the faint green had long disappeared. A kind of bright yellow spread flat on the ground. Moreover, this kind of bright yellow seemed to cover the sky and the earth as far as the eye could see. Wife, is this the ancestral shrine of your Kai family? Why is it so hot? Xiaohua hesitated and asked in a low voice. Husband, Fairy Hongxia's face was apologetic. She whispered, The direction is right. But all the signs are blurry. Even some mountain ranges, especially the rivers, are all gone. I'm still looking carefully. Then, Fairy Hongxia was also puzzled. As for the heat, it started 4 or 5 days ago. And as the soul beasts flew, it became hotter and hotter. This heat is very abnormal. Perhaps this is the reason for the drought in the Million Meng Mountains? Xiaohua released his divine sense and looked for a long time. Then he said, It's the same for 100 miles away. There's no sign of human habitation. Perhaps it's really caused by this kind of weather phenomenon. But if that's the case, then the millet. I don't know if it's effective. Husband, how long will it take for the millet to bear fruit? Fairy Hongxia obviously didn't know anything about farming. She actually thought that millet was the same as the spiritual wood. According to the Elder Wu, the millet of the Million Ming Mountains should take 3 months to ear and 5 months to ripen, Xiaohua said in a familiar manner. Then, we'll only know after 5 months? Fairy Hongxia was a little surprised. It won't take that long, Xiaohua smiled. As long as the millet can ear, we'll be able to see the fullness and density of the millet. Then we'll know the harvest when it ripens. I understand. Fairy Hongxia naturally understood with just a hint. Also, the spiritual seed that your husband picked up seems to be different from the usual ones. When I was in Ming, your husband noticed that they grow extremely fast. Perhaps the millet seeds will be different as well. Good. Fairy Hongxia smiled. If that's the case, Xiao Mao's people will starve to death. Although the soul cultivators and the Million Meng Mountains natives are considered enemies of my Dao sect, but they're all human lives. Xiaohua sighed. I hope that when Xiao Mao becomes the leader, the Elder Wu, he'll be able to change this situation. It's there. While Fairy Hongxia was talking to Xiaohua, she suddenly jumped up from the back of Qing Shi Wuyu and pointed to the side in the distance with a smile. It's that hand. It's called Immortal guides the way on the jade slip. Oh? Xiaohua looked over. Sure enough, on his right, at the edge of what he could see with his naked eye, a mountain peak appeared. That mountain peak was very strange. At a glance, it really looked like a clenched fist, with the thumb and forefinger extended out. We'll turn around now. Xiaohua was also excited. Didn't they come to the Million Meng Mountains to find the ancestral hall of the Kai clan? After so many things had happened, they were finally at the end. Husband. Fairy Hongxia smiled and transmitted her voice. Don't turn around first. Let's fly 100 miles ahead. Oh, your husband understands, Xiaohua said in realization. Then, they flew for another 200 miles. In front of them was a mountain peak that wasn't very tall. Xiaohua transmitted his voice to Xiao Mao and asked Qing Wuyu to land on the mountain peak. Then, he asked Xie Qi and Qing Wuyu to wait on the mountain peak. The four of them flew to Immortal shows the way alone. Seeing Xiao Mao leaving him behind, Jie Qi's face was very sad. It seemed that he had lost Xiao Mao's trust. Xiao Mao looked at these loyal and devoted subjects, and felt very uncomfortable in his heart. He felt more and more that he should do something for them. He even asked Xiao Hua in a low voice for a long time on the way to Immortal guides the way. Xiao Hua wanted to help Xiao Mao, but there was nothing he could do. He had been planting and harvesting corn in his space. However, these were all used to make seeds. He couldn't casually give them to the natives as rations. Not long after, everyone landed on the mountain peak of Immortal shows the way. Fairy Hong Xia took out the jade scroll again and carefully examined it for a long time. Then, she nodded affirmatively and pointed her finger. "Senior brother, look over there. There are some marks in this dried-up place. It should be a river that flowed before. Over there should be more than 10 rows of huge rocks. It looks like a fortress. Unfortunately, it has been hollowed out. Someone must have been here before." "Haha, senior sister," Xiao Mao laughed. "The world has changed too much. Even if its Immortal shows the way mountain peak, it might disappear at any time. If your Kai family's ancestral shrine uses this as a marker, it won't be reliable in the future." Sigh. Fairy Hong Xia laughed bitterly. "Qing Yang's Kai family might have other ways. However, this is the only way I can get my hands on. Fortunately, my master was thoughtful and obtained the secret method to open the ancestral shrine. Otherwise, even if I found this place, I wouldn't be able to do it. This is Million Mountain Meng. The formations of Dao sect cultivators can't be revealed casually. Ordinary methods can't be used. On the contrary, the simplest and most common method is effective." Li Zongbao looked around and said calmly, "Junior sister and Xiao Hua will lead the way. Senior brother and Xiao Mao will follow behind." Fairy Hong Xia couldn't hide the urgency on her face. After saying a few words, she activated her flying technique and flew towards a direction. Of course, the direction she was flying towards was not the direction of Immortal shows the way. -11. Chapter 2836. After flying for a full hour, Fairy Hong Xia came to a stop in front of a huge crater that was at least 100 li away. This is the ancestral hall of your Kai family? Where is it?" Xiao Hua was very surprised. When he saw the location of this depression with his divine sense, Xiao Hua felt that there was something strange. Not only did he release his divine sense, but he also released his Buddhist sense and scanned the entire depression. Not only did he not find any fluctuations of magic power, but he also did not find anything strange. "Of course it's here!" Fairy Hong Xia smiled sweetly. "This used to be a huge lake, but now the lake water is gone. Then, can you still find the ancestral hall of the Kai family?" Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao caught up and asked worriedly. We're already at the doorstep. "Of course, I have my ways," Fairy Hong Xia said proudly to Xiao Hua. "Xiao Hua, is there anything out of the ordinary around here?" "No." Xiao Hua shook his head. "There's really no one around." "That's good," Fairy Hong Xia said with a smile. "Xiao Lang, please retreat a little. Watch me open the doors of the ancestral hall." "All right." Xiao Hua and the rest retreated a few feet. Unexpectedly, Fairy Hong Xia shook her head and said, "You still have to retreat." Xiao Hua was a little flabbergasted. He retreated more than 100 feet before stopping. Just as Xiao Hua and the rest stopped, they heard a crisp sound in front of them. A crystal-clear phoenix celestial body with a faint sapphire blue radiance was released from Fairy Hong Xia's body. The moment the celestial body appeared in midair, it immediately spread its wings. Rings of light shone from its wings, like the colorful feathers of a phoenix. What was special was that when the sun shone on the celestial body, a rainbow of colors shot out from the celestial body, making it look extremely beautiful. Xiao Hua had naturally seen Fairy Hongxia reconstruct her phoenix celestial body in the cave. He only felt that it was weird, but did not pay much attention to it. Now that he saw it again under the light of day, he could not help but gasp. Putting aside the power of this phoenix celestial body, just the beauty of this beautiful mobile was definitely worthy of Fairy Hongxia's beauty. Woo! The phoenix Dharma body slightly spread its wings, and a round of light flashed by like a flying shadow. An indescribable illusion immediately appeared in Xiaohua's eyes, as if the phoenix Dharma body had rushed into his eyes. Eh? Not only is Senior Martial Sister's Ice Phoenix celestial body much more beautiful, but it's also a little smaller. Xiao Mao was also intoxicated, and only after a while did he speak in a low voice. Not bad. Xiaohua also noticed that when the Ice Phoenix was reforged, it was still the same as before. But now, the Ice Phoenix had actually shrunk, and it was only 30 meters in size. He didn't know why. Just as Xiaohua and the rest were watching, Fairy Hongxia's figure followed the Ice Phoenix celestial body and rushed into the deep depression. About 20 meters away from where she was previously standing, Fairy Hongxia rushed straight up into the sky again. Pooh! Fairy Hongxia paused for a moment, opened her mouth, and spat out a mouthful of essence blood. Her hands had already formed a seal, and she struck it. There were only a few seals, and they looked very simple. Under the seal, the essence blood spun a few times, and actually turned into an inch-long short arrow. Go! Fairy Hongxia lightly reprimanded. She pointed with both hands, and the blood-red short arrow rushed down from the sky, straight towards Fairy Hongxia's body, and shot towards the edge of the depression. With a soft "pa" sound, the short arrow landed on a flat, slanted wall. The moment the short arrow touched the slanted wall, it immediately sank in, and even left a soybean-sized hole in the slanted wall. Just a moment later, an extremely strange sound came from the slanted wall. It was like the cry of a phoenix, but also like the roar of a dragon. Moreover, this sound seemed to be compressed, and was extremely sharp. Along with this sound, an earth-shattering impact came from the soybean-sized hole, directly and horizontally pressing in all directions. Although Xiaohua and the rest were dozens of meters away, they could still feel the surging force. Since Xiaohua and the rest could feel it, Fairy Hongxia, who was close at hand, would naturally bear the brunt of it. In fact, a spiral-like shockwave engulfed Fairy Hongxia's entire body along with the impact. Jie, the Ice Phoenix celestial body let out a long cry, flapping its wings, and welcomed this inexplicable wave. The wave's penetrative power was extremely strong, and in an instant, it passed through Fairy Hongxia's physical body and celestial body. Fairy Hongxia's protective magic treasure did not have any effect at all. The wave was like a huge wave, and after passing through Fairy Hongxia, it immediately converged, and the entire thing disappeared into the small hole. Moreover, after the impact, there was no echo, and the entire hole was the same as before, without any changes. Looking at Fairy Hongxia again, she could not hide the joy on her face. She kept her Ice Phoenix celestial body, retreated, and stood in midair outside the hole. Turning her head, she said to Xiaohua and the rest, "Xiao Lang, senior brother Xiao Mao, follow me into the ancestral hall." Hearing Fairy Hongxia's call, Xiaohua and the rest hurriedly flew over. However, before they could get close to Fairy Hongxia, they heard a series of violent crackling sounds, like thunder, below Fairy Hongxia's body, which was the place where the blood arrow had flown in, and then another wave of multicolored light shot up into the sky. Fairy Hongxia was clearly caught off guard, and her entire body was swept aside by the multicolored light, flying more than 10 meters away. Woo 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 woo, as if a bugle horn had been blown, an object that looked like a scroll was revealed from the light. The light flowed rapidly on the scroll, and as the sound of the bugle horn rang, it slowly unfurled itself. The scroll was laid flat in the deep hole, and as the scroll unfolded, a beautiful scene appeared in the light. There were mountains, rivers, birds, fish, and even a few empty boats floating on the surface of the water. Rumble. When the scroll was unfurled by dozens of feet, the mountain peak that was originally flat on the scroll seemed to be pulled by a large hand. It created a loud noise and slowly rushed out from the scroll. The mountain range around the mountain peak was also continuously formed and gradually meandered. The ripples on the surface of the water also surged out, and within the ripples, multicolored fish jumped out from the water from time to time. Chirp, chirp, chirp. A few crisp chirps of birds rang out, and on the big tree that had just straightened up, emerald green birds flew between the soft branches again. Even Fairy Hongxia couldn't help but open her mouth, and stared blankly at the scene before her. She watched as the scroll gradually filled up the hundreds of miles deep hole, and the previously dry hole had turned into a beautiful land of fish and rice in just a few moments. Quick, Xiao Hua, who was next to him, was stunned for a moment. When he saw the first open scroll begin to turn again, as if it was going to roll everything in, he hurriedly shouted, "Are we going to find the entrance to the ancestral temple in here?" Yes, I understand." Fairy Hongxia also came to her senses, and quickly pointed at the newly formed island on the surface of the water, and said, "The entrance is on the island. Previously, I thought it was in this deep hole." As she spoke, Fairy Hongxia took the lead and flew out, rushing towards the island. The millions of Meng mountains that were still in a drought just a moment ago had now arrived at a place filled with water. The air was filled with dense water vapor, and even Xiao Hua had the urge to jump into the water to play. However, right behind them, the scroll had already been rolled up, and its speed was much faster than when it was unfolded. The sound of the bugle horn was getting more urgent, as if it was urging everyone to quickly fly to the island. "Not good! I can't use my divine sense!" Xiao Hua, who had been using his divine sense to keep a lookout, suddenly felt a strong wave coming from the scroll, covering everything within 100 miles. His divine sense was immediately confined within his body, and could no longer be released. Quick, Fairy Hongxia was also a little anxious. It's not easy to open the ancestral shrine's door once. Although the jade didn't mention the interval between the second opening, but it definitely won't let us open it a second time so easily. As she spoke, Fairy Hongxia once again activated her flying technique, wanting to increase her speed. "Let me do it!" Xiao Hua pulled Fairy Hongxia's hand, and whispered, "Don't use your magic!" Okay, Fairy Hongxia knew that Xiao Hua's lightning evasion was very fast, so she obediently passed her hand to Xiao Hua, and retracted her magic. Rumble. A burst of lightning flashed around Xiao Hua's body, but just as Xiao Hua was about to activate the lightning evasion technique, Li Zongbao shouted from afar, "Junior brother Xiao, you can't use the lightning evasion technique." "Oh?" Xiao Hua was slightly taken aback as he hastily turned his head around. Sure enough, right behind him, due to the appearance of the lightning, hundreds of cracks had actually appeared on the bright and beautiful scenery. Furthermore, the cracks were growing larger and larger, as if the entire scenery was about to be torn apart. "Darling Xiao!" Fairy Hongxia also hurriedly shouted, "Let this concubine fly over by herself." "Ha, no need, watch this Xiao." Xiao Hua saw that the lightning evasion was too overbearing, and the scroll was actually unable to withstand it. He immediately activated his wind evasion, and like a breeze, he blew towards the island. The island looked very close, but when he really flew, he realized that it was extremely far away. Xiao Hua flew for half the time of a meal before he reached it. "Husband, let's split up and look for it. It's a phoenix totem." Fairy Hongxia clearly did not expect that her spiritual will could not be used, and was a little flustered. The moment she landed on the island, she did not have the time to look carefully, and immediately said to Xiao Hua, while she herself flew towards a direction. Okay, Xiao Hua was clearly not satisfied with Fairy Hongxia's preparations, but he could not say anything. He casually agreed, and was about to fly away, but when he saw Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao in the distance, he sighed. "These two, sigh, I should still use the flowing cloud flying ship. Forget it, let's search first, and wait for the two of them to arrive." -11. Chapter 2837. After the time it takes to eat a meal, Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao finally arrived. Just behind them, the clouds in the sky changed dramatically, and all the scenery was engulfed in it. It was like a giant mouth that wanted to swallow everything. "Quick, senior brother, quickly find a phoenix totem!" That's the entrance to the Kai family's ancestral shrine. Xiaohua had already searched nearby, but he didn't find any traces, so he flew over and urged. Okay. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao both agreed, and hurriedly flew in two different directions. While Li Zongbao was flying, he occasionally looked back, and when he saw the sky full of celestial phenomena, he was slightly stunned and whispered, This seems to be a kind of array. Xiaohua was right next to him, and he hurriedly replied, Senior brotherly, what time is it? Quickly find the entrance. If you can't find the entrance. Speaking up to here, Xiaohua was stunned again, and a kind of fear appeared on his face. He shouted, Damn it, it can't be. If we can't find the entrance, we will. Quick! Even Li Zongbao had an epiphany, and he hurriedly said, Definitely. This Kai family's ancestral shrine is so important, how can it be easy to enter? If you don't have absolute confidence, and don't have the ability to enter the ancestral shrine, this ancestral shrine, I'm afraid it's a dead end. Damn Qin Yang Kai family! Xiaohua cursed. No wonder they didn't care when my wife took the jade pendant that leads to the ancestral shrine, so that's why. Li Zongbao also hurriedly flew away, and he didn't know if he noticed, but Xiaohua actually called Fairy Hong's Xia wife in front of him for the first time. When he first saw the island, when it was time to find it, he felt that it was extremely difficult. How could a small phoenix totem be easy to find? Xiaohua, who had no sense of direction, searched for a long time, but he didn't have the slightest clue. At this time, the sky above the island was filled with countless remnant clouds, and endless darkness. The previous scenery of the lake and mountains had now turned into wreckage floating in the air. Obviously, Scroll had reached the island, and her life was at stake. What should I do? What should I do? Xiaohua frowned. This young master is known as the person with the best luck in the Dawn Rain continent. How can I not have a way? Holy shit, discerning eyes. Xiaohua suddenly slapped his forehead as he came to a realization. Xiaohua didn't know what happened to his Dharma eye after the last lightning tribulation, but it gradually became blurry. Xiaohua had already forgotten about it. Xiaohua didn't dare to be careless. He hurriedly opened his left hand and opened his Dharma eye. Sure enough, everything in the Dharma eye was blurry, as if it was covered by a thin veil, making it difficult to see clearly. However, although it was indistinct, he could still see through the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. A small, slender, and long brilliance appeared extremely far away. Senior Marshal Brotherly Xiao Mao. Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent and hastily flew towards the location of the brilliance while shouting loudly, Big brother! Xiao Mao was the first to come over after hearing the sound. Xiaohua hurriedly said, Quickly go and find your senior sister, the totem is just ahead. Yes, Xiao Mao trusted Xiaohua the most. He didn't even ask how Xiaohua knew that she was in front. He quickly flew into the sky to look for Red Dawn Fairy. When Xiaohua arrived, he discovered that this was a low-lying area. That one zhang tall phoenix totem was actually stuck in the depths. If Xiaohua didn't see it, how could he find this place? Seeing the totem, Xiaohua let out a long sigh of relief. He opened his Dharma eye and looked down again. It was an extremely small, thumb-sized brilliance that went straight down. This? How do I go in? Xiaohua was a little confused. Not long later, Red Dawn Fairy indeed followed Xiao Mao and flew over. Li Zongbao also rushed over. Xiaohua, it's all thanks to you. Seeing that the phoenix totem was so hard to find, Red Dawn Fairy couldn't help but rejoice that she brought Xiaohua over. Sigh you! Why didn't you consider this situation earlier? Xiaohua couldn't help but grumble. Red Dawn Fairy said apologetically. Xiaohua, wait a moment, I'll explain slowly. As she spoke, Red Dawn Fairy put her fair index finger in her mouth and bit it. A smear of blood flowed out from the tip of her finger. Red Dawn Fairy squatted down and smeared the blood on the eyes of the phoenix totem. Buzz buzz! When the blood from her finger landed on the eyes of the phoenix, it immediately emitted a blood-red glow. The eyes actually moved slightly, and the blood-red glow began to spread towards the totem. Phew, Red Dawn Fairy let out a sigh of relief. She looked up and saw that the wave-like dark clouds were not far away from them. She then said, Xiao Hua, I've prepared a lot before coming here, but the ancestral shrine of the Kai family is very mysterious. This totem and the scroll just now were not recorded in the jade amulet. It might have been passed down orally by the patriarch. I'm not a direct descendant of the Kai family of Qing Yang, so I can't know about this secret. Also, Million Mountain Meng, I've deliberately investigated it in the Sky Patrol City, but who would have thought? Million Mountain Meng actually looks like this. It's completely different from what I've imagined. Big brother. Xiao Mao laughed. I seem to have been born here. I don't even know what Million Mountain Meng looks like, let alone senior sister. Besides, if the Sky Patrol City can spy on Million Mountain Meng, doesn't that mean that everyone knows about the war between the soul cultivators and the sword cultivators? Xiao Mao then said, By the way, I wonder if Miss Jioxia has delivered the communication talisman? The Sword Dao War should be ending soon, right? How can it be so fast? Xiao Hua shook his head and said, I think it'll take a while more. If the nascent soul masters receive the news and know about the sword cultivators' intentions, I'm afraid the war will really end. Our Dao sect will be able to recoup the losses of the first stage. I hope that's the case. Li Zongbao did not seem optimistic. Why? Xiao Hua was about to ask this question. Suddenly, a rumbling sound that sounded like the collapse of a mountain was heard from above their heads. Countless hurricanes swept across the sky like a mountain pressing down on them. Hurry, hurry. The four of them could not help but shout in their hearts. When they looked at the totem again, it was already filled with blood threads and gradually began to spin. Clang. The sound of metal clanging resounded through the entire area. A clear light soared into the sky. That light spun rapidly, creating an extremely strong suction force. Xiao Hua and the others couldn't resist, and were sucked into it. Even the hurricane that was already pressing down on everyone's heads was pulled in. Woo! When the hurricanes fell into the brilliance suddenly retracted. When the brilliance fell into the depression, the phoenix totem that was previously revealed had already disappeared. Moreover, the entire island was torn into pieces by the hurricanes. No trace of it could be seen anymore. Then, when he looked at the 100 miles deep depression in Mount Meng, as the scroll was rolled up, all the sceneries disappeared, and the place returned to its original barren state. It seemed that no one would know that the four cultivators of the Dao sect had been here. No one would know that there was actually a fallen ancestral temple of a cultivator clan in Million Mountain Meng. Even if Yi Yu was thousands of miles away, he would not know that the Xiao Mao that he had been thinking about was actually not far away from him. Yi Yu was different from before. The black clothes he was wearing were not sword armor. They were actually similar to what Xiao Mao was wearing now. The only difference was that there were fewer tassels on the black clothes and the patterns were different as well. Of course, Yi Yu was not flying on his sword. Instead, he was riding on a huge spirit beast. This spirit beast had a wingspan of over 200 feet. Its head was a few feet in size and looked extremely ferocious. From its wide mouth, drops of beast saliva that were larger than a fist dripped down from its sharp teeth, emitting an unpleasant stench. Ah Lu. Yi Yu stood firmly on the head of the spirit beast. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and asked in a low voice, That guy's actions, are they really so difficult to find out? Beside Yi Yu were the disciples who had flown into Million Mountain Meng with him. These disciples had also changed their attire. One of the disciples who was closer to Yi Yu smiled bitterly when he heard Yi Yu's question. Master, this lowly one seems to have told you a few times, right? Night Rain's tone was cold. That disciple's face was filled with fear, and he hurriedly said with a smile, All right, Sect Master knows. After I received Sect Master's orders, I quietly approached Xiao. You should know that these cultivators of the Dao sect have powerful divine abilities. This lowly one is far from being a match for them. This lowly one did not dare to get too close and could only follow from afar. So far, this lowly one did not even know how far away he was. Furthermore, This lowly one did not really understand the language of Ming Mountains. It was only later, when Ah San brought a native from Kenji village, that this lowly one was able to find out more about that person's actions. When Ah Lu said this, he carefully looked at Yi Yu's face. When he saw that Yi Yu did not show any reaction, he had no choice but to continue. However, he had already said this many times, so he was not afraid of making a mistake. He looked at the flapping wings of the spirit beast under his feet and said smoothly, "That person seemed to have not gone straight to Shebi village after entering Ming Mountains. He did not even go to Shang village. Instead, he quietly headed toward a small village called Bayan village. Furthermore, the strange thing was, that person's information disappeared from Bayan village. It was as if he had never been there. Naturally, this lowly one did not dare to go to Bayan village myself. I could only ask that native to help me find out." At this point, Ah Lu rolled his eyes and asked tentatively, "Master, perhaps that person has already gone back?" This lowly one heard from that native that a few days ago, Bayan village was attacked by beetles near Bayan village. On top of that, there was also the sound of heavenly thunder that rushed out of Ming Mountains. Could it be that that person saw how terrifying Ming Mountains were, and how they could not deal with the beetles that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, so they went back with their tails between their legs? Humph, how is that possible? Yi Yu turned his head and said coldly, "Why did that person come to Ming Mountains? Do you think he came here with me like you? What kind of bullshit relationship do that terrifying phoenix, Li Zongbao, Kai Hongxia, and the others have with Ming Mountains? If that person did not know about his origin and the secret of this place, would he travel thousands of miles to Ming Mountains? You must know, the journey from Sky Patrol City to Ming Mountains is extremely arduous. If he did not know that everything here is under his control, would he be willing to take the risk? Please forgive me if there are any mistakes." -11. Chapter 2838. My lord. Ah Lu showed a flattering expression and said with a smile, "You've already taken control of Shibai village. Even if that person returns to Ming Mountains and Shibai village, what can he do? Don't you just need to say a few words for everything? How can you be afraid of him? What do you know?" Yi Yu sneered. "This is Ming Mountains, not the sword domain. Strength doesn't determine everything. It wasn't easy for me to build such a good foundation here. How can I let that little kid ruin everything? Do you know that all mistakes start from a trace of carelessness?" Then Yi Yu shifted his gaze from the distance and looked at Ah Lu with a smile in his eyes, asking, "What else? What else?" Ah Lu was startled and quickly said with a smile, "My lord, I've already told you so many times. What's there to hide? You won't suspect that I and that person." He, of course I won't suspect you." Yi Yu laughed, but then said with a deeper meaning, "However, the situation now is different from before. What I need is someone who can do things honestly. Ah Lu, you've followed me for so long. You should know my temper. I've already given you several chances, but you don't seem to have grasped them even once." "My lord." Ah Lu's expression changed greatly. He was so scared that he quickly knelt down on the soul beast and wanted to argue. "Ah Chi, tell him where that person is." Yi Yu didn't even look at Ah Lu and said to the disciple who had been standing there silently and looking into the distance. Yes, hearing Yi Yu's order, Ah Chi hurriedly bowed and said, "This lowly one has received orders from my lord to split up with Ah Lu. This lowly one knows that this matter is very important to my lord, so I didn't dare to neglect it. I personally made a trip to the Jing Apple village. First, I invited a native that this lowly one knew to go to the Bayan stronghold to inquire. In addition, this lowly one was afraid that this native wouldn't be able to obtain any useful information, so I spent some effort to invite a somewhat famous soul warrior in the Jing Apple village." At this point, Ah Chi hesitated and glanced at Ah Lu. "Continue," Yi Yu ordered indifferently. "Yes." Ah Chi clenched his teeth and said, "I didn't get any useful information from that aborigine. It seems that those aborigines are very supportive of that person, and they all kept their mouths shut, as if that person disappeared before he even reached Bayan village. But from the mouth of that soul warrior, this humble one learned a completely different piece of information. See, when Alu heard this, he fell to his knees with a plop. His forehead was covered with sweat as he cried out, "My lord, this lowly one was negligent. This lowly one made a mistake. Please punish me, my lord." Lil 7 glanced at Lil 6, and a trace of mockery flashed across his eyes. He said again, "After hearing this news, I really understand why the Lord values this matter so much, and also why the Lord wants to send me to the Bayan stronghold. If the Lord doesn't know about this, I'm afraid the Lord will be abnormally passive." Then, Achi roughly explained the situation of Xiao Mao and the others in Bayan village. Other than the incident in Su Garden, most of the information was the same. Finally, Achi said, "The 5 people who entered Meng Mountains seemed to have a conflict. That extremely beautiful woman flew out of Meng Mountains, and the terrifying phoenix actually used the lightning escape technique to chase after her. My lord, you are really wise. That woman's cultivation seems to be far superior to the terrifying phoenix. If they fought at Drifting Cloud Lake, we would definitely die. When the terrifying phoenix returned, that woman didn't appear again. Clearly, she had left Meng Mountains. That person also left not long after, but that soul warrior didn't know where they went. Because when that person left, other than Elder Wu and Ji-Man, no one else knew. The other soul warriors only guessed because they couldn't see that person. Of course, this humble one also asked that soul warrior to make some more inquiries when he returned to Jing Apple Village. After all, that is the only way to Shibayan Village. But from the information brought by the soul beast a few days ago, they didn't pass by Jing Apple Village. My lord, please punish this humble one for not being able to find out more specific movements." Alu. Yu smiled and said, "Did you hear that? What do you think is the difference between what you found out and what Achi found out?" Alu's sweat fell like rain. He was very clear in his heart that he had really made a mistake this time. Night Rain had placed too much importance on this matter. She actually sent Achi to investigate after him. She was afraid that she would reveal that person's whereabouts. And he had been too careless, only sending a native to investigate, and ended the matter carelessly. Of course, from his point of view, it wasn't considered carelessness. It was just that he hadn't thought it through. "My lord, it's all my fault." Alu didn't dare to argue and hurriedly said, "It's all my fault." However, if this humble one was in Achi's place, this humble one would definitely be able to do better. You're right," Yu said lightly. "If it was any other time, this lord wouldn't punish you like this. But it's different today. You've seen it yourself. That man has won the hearts of the natives. And, to tell you the truth, that man is the descendant of the great god Shibai. His bloodline is extremely pure, and he is my enemy. Once the news of his arrival in Meng Mountains is spread out, all the natives of Shibai village will have to bow their heads and listen to his orders. So, the ones we can use are only a few soul warriors. Remember, only those soul warriors who have cultivated some soul spells will have different thoughts from the natives. We can only use this. This is a moment of life and death for this lord. This lord won't allow any mistakes." "Yes." Everyone's heart trembled as they answered in unison. As for Alu, Yu said lightly, "Along the way, why would this lord ask you so many times for no reason? This lord has given you so many chances." My lord. Alu suddenly felt that something was wrong, so he quickly knelt down and begged. "Too bad, you're always slacking off, and you're still like this today." Yiyu's face suddenly turned ferocious. If it wasn't for Achi's probing today, this lord would still be in the dark, right? "My lord!" Alu shouted. "My lord, please, puff!" A pale golden sword beam came out of Yiyu's mouth and pierced into Alu's forehead. Alu didn't have any chance to resist or dodge. Humph! Yiyu put away the small sword and kicked Alu's corpse off the soul beast. Then, he glanced at the others and snorted coldly. All of you have lived peacefully outside of Meng Mountains for nearly 10 years. Now, this is a moment of life and death. If this lord succeeds, then I'll settle down in Meng Mountains. But if this lord fails, all of you won't be able to live either. All of you will have to rack your brains and follow this lord to kill that man. Otherwise, all of you will end up like Alu. Yes. Everyone bowed their heads and replied. As for Yu, he raised his head and looked in the direction outside of Meng Mountains. Then, he viciously said, "Third uncle, oh third uncle. Back then, you made it very clear that bastard's everything was taken care of by you. That's why this lord was tricked into coming here. But now, that little bastard is still alive in this world. What kind of medicine are you selling in your gourd?" Coo. While Yu was talking to himself, the soul beast under his feet let out an extremely strange sound. After the sound of the beast's cry faded away, the sound of the beast's cry became louder and louder. It didn't stop for a moment, and it sounded like a frog singing in a pond. Following that, several strange-looking soul beasts began to appear within 100 kilometers of the city. On the back of each soul beast stood several strangely dressed soul warriors. Of course, the clothes of these soul warriors were different from each other. 30% of the soul warriors wore clothes that were similar to Yu's, with only a small difference. The other 70% of the soul warriors wore clothes that were completely different from Yu's. These soul warriors' clothes were very neat and tidy. They were symmetrical on both sides and had very few decorations. In the middle of their smooth robes, there was even a silk ribbon that looked like a belt. Even more strange was the fact that these soul warriors had their hair tied together. Some of them had their hair tied up with hairpins, while others had their hair tied up with a cloth. Coo. The sound of a pigeon's cry could be heard again. Then, a giant soul beast with pure white feathers over its body flew over from the distance. On the back of this soul beast was a man wearing white soul armor. He held a bone fan in his hand and had a smile on his face as he flew towards Yu's location. Seeing this man coming over, Yu hurriedly put on a smile on his face. With a tap of his foot, the soul beast flapped its wings and slowly came to a stop in midair. "It's been a long time since we last met. Fu Man Ho Yen pays his respects here." The soul warrior didn't speak the strange language of Ming Mountains, but the language commonly used in sword domain. "Greetings, old brother Ho Yen," Yu said with a smile. "The last time I saw old brother was 10 years ago. I didn't think that 10 years would pass in the blink of an eye. Old brother's magnificence is still the same as before. This one is truly envious." "Haha, you're too kind." Ho Yen laughed and waved his hand. "How can this little brother's stinky skin compare to Fu Man's? Who doesn't know that Fu Man of Shibai village is a brave and intelligent warrior? If Fu Man didn't have such intelligence, how could Ji Man have taken a fancy to him?" You flatter me. Yi laughed. "This one is only living in Shibai village. How can I compare to old brother Ho Yen, who is a direct descendant of Back Earth village? Old brother Ho Yen has found a concubine. Wouldn't your children be Ji Man and Elder Wu?" "Sure." Ho Yan's expression changed slightly. He hurriedly looked around and said, "Fu Man, my wife isn't a concubine. Please be lenient with your words. Don't speak nonsense. If others know about this, I will have a miserable life." So what?" Yi laughed in a low voice. -11. Chapter 2839. How could Ho Yen dare to let him continue? Then, he quickly added, "Oh right, I have to thank Fu Man. This place is under the jurisdiction of Shibai village, and we shouldn't have gone too deep into it. But now, the battle with the sword, the sword cultivators is too intense, and I'm afraid that Shibai village can't organize too many soul warriors. That's why I've decided to send more soul warriors here. I just wanted to greet G-Man, but I didn't expect that G-Man would be willing to send Fu Man here. I'm really surprised. Ho-Tu village's reaction is Shibai village's problem, and Shibai village's problem is also Ho-Tu village's problem." Yi smiled and said, "I didn't expect that, The reason for the drought in Ming Mountains is because of this. Since Ho-Tu Village is eradicating the evil for the people of Ming Mountains, how can Shibai Village not contribute? I've just returned from Ming Mountains, and I've received G-Man's order to come here and meet you. Once this is done, you and I will both be the heroes of Ming Mountains. Let's not talk about my Fu Man, but what you think, you should be confident, right? Ha! I hope you and I can succeed. Ho Yen laughed. Also, Yu's smile faded, and his face turned cold. My clan was wiped out by sword cultivators. I'm the one who was born, and I've made it my life's goal to avenge my clan. Sword Realm, swordsmen, they have nothing to do with me. I'm just a Fu Man from Shibai Village. Yes, Fu Man is right. It's all my fault. Ho Yen smiled and said, After this mission is over, I'll hold a banquet in Ho-Tu Village to apologize. That won't be necessary. A smile appeared on Yu's face as he waved his hand and said, From now on, I'll just treat myself as a member of Ming Mountains, and have no other thoughts. That's why, when you called me, I rushed here. Not only do I want to help you, but I also want to erase the evil from Ming Mountains, and return Ming Mountains to its former glory. Good! Ho Yen clapped his hands and said, The more Fu Man talks, the more I feel that I'm wrong. If Fu Man needs anything in the future, please let me know. Brother Ho Yen, are you serious? Ho Yan's words were perfunctory, but Yu asked, Oh? When Ho Yen heard this, he was slightly stunned. Immediately, a trace of realization appeared on his face. He said with a fake smile, Fu Man, I feel that something is wrong. How could you leave the Shibai stronghold so easily? Even if it was little brother's message and that item, it was impossible for Fu Man to come here personally. So Fu Man was waiting for me here. Brother, I've been searching all over Ming Mountains, but I couldn't find anyone I could entrust this task to. Then, when I saw brother's message, my eyes lit up. So, I immediately urged all the people in the village to come and help you, Yu said with a smile. Then, he looked around and whispered, Of course, if you need my help in the future, the people of Shibai Village will support you unconditionally. Ho Yen rolled his eyes and looked at Night Rain and the disciples on Night Rain's back. He smiled and said, Since Fu Man is in trouble, how can I not help? Fu Man, please come over. I would like to hear what you have to say. Good. Yu didn't hesitate, and with a flash of sword light, she landed on Ho Yan's soul beast. Ho Yan's soul beast spread its wings and flew away from the other spirit warriors. After Yu finished speaking, Ho Yan's face was filled with shock. Without thinking, he waved his hand and said, Fu Man, this is your Shibai Village's internal affairs. I am the heir of the Ho-Tu Village. How can I casually participate? I can't. Brother. Night Rain seemed to have expected Ho Yan's reaction. A strange smile appeared on his face. He whispered, Although this is my Shibai Village's internal affair, but it's also Ming Mountain's internal affair. You seem to know the relationship between Shibai Village and Ho-Tu Village better than I do. In fact, I don't need to say anything else. You have a lot of heirs in Back Earth Village. There are many behind you, but there aren't many ahead of you. Why did you work so hard for so many years? Is it to find the reason for the drought in Ming Mountains? If it's really so noble and simple, just pretend I didn't say anything. I'll turn around and leave. After saying that, Night Rain paused for a moment. He glanced at Ho Yen, who seemed to be thinking about something. Then, he smiled and said, Being able to work for Ming Mountains is naturally our goal. But if we can get the support of the people of Wu Village, get their respect, and get the position of Grand Wu under their support, then we can do more things for them. Isn't that better? As far as I know, your Ho-Tu Village will soon decide the next Grand Wu or G-Man. That Ho Ming and Ho Yi seems to have something going on. That's why Brother Ho Yen is so active in preparing for this, hoping that you can do something about the drought in Ming Mountains. If you didn't have this opportunity, you wouldn't have sent a message to Shibai Village, would you? While speaking, Night Rain was observing Ho Yan's expression. Isn't this the reason why I came to you? Isn't it because we're in the same situation? You and I can only work together and support each other. Only then can we do something great in Meng Mountains. Sai, the situation of my Ho-Tu village is not as simple as you think. Ho Yan finally opened his mouth. Ha! Night Rain didn't wait for him to finish. He laughed and said, "Simple things are complicated when you think about them, and complicated things are simple when you do them. Brother Ho Yan, I've given you my heart today, and I'm sincerely here to form an alliance with you. No matter how simple or complicated your problem is, I'll face it with you. As for me, I'm just asking you to kill a man you don't even know. This man is a cultivator. He's the enemy of Meng Mountains. What are you worried about? In fact, if I didn't want to be honest with you, I'd just say he's a cultivator. How would you know?" "Fine." Ho Yan's face showed a strange expression. He nodded and said, "Since he's a cultivator, it's fine. But if he's recognized by G-Man or Shibai village, then don't blame me." Hearing this, Night Rain was overjoyed. He clapped his hands and said, of course, I won't fight with my brother." Unfortunately, before he could finish his words, a loud beast cry sounded in the distance. It sounded a little tragic. Ho Yan's expression changed slightly and he said anxiously, "Fu Man, quick, it seems that a boy has found that guy. We can't let him run away, okay?" Hearing the beast cry, Night Rain's heart skipped a beat. Since he had reached an agreement with Ho Yan, he knew that this matter was very important to both him and Ho Yan. He didn't delay and flew back to his spirit beast. Without hesitation, he stepped on the ground. The spirit beast flapped its wings again and flew toward the beast's cry. Ho Yan's spirit beast seemed to be even faster. It was already more than 10 feet away from him. This. Millions of people in Meng Mountains were worried about Xiao Mao's arrival at Yiyu. They did not know where Xiao Mao had gone to. At this moment, Xiao Mao was floating in an unknown space. His ears were silent, and his limbs were motionless. He was staring dumbfoundedly at the unimaginably huge phoenix above his head. Yes, the phoenix totem on the island had turned into a huge suction force. Xiao Mao couldn't resist at all and was sucked into it. Under the suction force, Xiao Mao's body kept rolling. It seemed that he couldn't stop. When the suction force disappeared, an indescribable feeling arose in his heart. If he was on the ground, an irresistible suction force would pull him firmly to the ground. If he wanted to move forward, he would have to lift his feet with all his strength. Even if a cultivator could fly, it would still consume his Dharma power. However, in this place, the suction force that he was used to had completely disappeared. A feeling of freedom appeared, and this freedom made Xiao Mao unable to get used to it. His body was almost unable to move. He wanted to lift his feet, but before he could lift them, his whole body was lying down. He wanted to lift his hands, but his whole body was tilting slightly. The most terrifying thing was that the energy that was flowing freely in his meridians was now in the same state as him. It was floating in the air in his meridians, as if it didn't listen to the circulation of his heart technique. What should I do? Xiao Mao was very anxious. When he looked around, an indescribable light flashed above his head. Xiao Mao only raised his head slightly, and an inconceivable feeling arose in his heart. Above his head, there was a huge phoenix. The size of this phoenix had long surpassed his imagination. 10,000 miles in size? 1,000,000 miles in size? Xiao Mao couldn't measure it, but he could clearly see that even the smallest cold feather on the phoenix was as huge as a mountain range. He was more insignificant than a little ant. Although the phoenix didn't move, a majestic aura and a light screen as vast as the sea enveloped this space. Outside this light screen, there was endless darkness. It was so dark that it made one's heart tremble, so dark that it made one's heart feel unsettled. Xiao Mao. A voice as small as an ant sounded in his ears. Oh! Xiao Mao was startled. He opened his mouth to respond, but he could only open his mouth. He couldn't make a single sound. Sound transmission. Xiao Hua's voice sounded. Xiao Mao suddenly woke up and turned his head to look elsewhere. When he saw Xiao Hua's situation clearly, he couldn't help but laugh. Xiao Hua seemed to be in an even more sorry state than Xiao Mao. His head was facing Xiao Mao, and his feet were facing up. It was no different from being upside down. Moreover, the clothes that were lifted up didn't cover Xiao Hua's head. Instead, it was casually spread out like a flower in full bloom. As for the voice from before, not a single word could be heard. -11. Chapter 2840. What are you laughing at? Xiao Hua's voice was heard again, sounding very strange. Big brother. Xiao Mao held back his laughter and said, Why are you upside down? It looks very strange. My head is upside down. Are you sure? Look for yourself, it's your head that's upside down. Xiao Hua finally understood why Xiao Mao was laughing, and he also started laughing. Me? Xiao Mao was stunned, and looked to his other side with difficulty. Indeed, Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia were standing there with their heads down, looking at his feet in disbelief. It seemed that Xiao Mao's head was really upside down. Damn it, this place is very strange. Xiao Mao laughed. How can you tell up from down? We're all upside down. While he was speaking, Xiao Hua's figure suddenly moved horizontally and flew towards a certain direction. Moreover, it was extremely slow, as if it was not strenuous at all. After flying for a moment, he suddenly stopped, and then flew towards Xiao Mao again. Big brother! How can you fly? Little brother's true yuan can't move. Xiao Mao asked curiously. I'm afraid you won't be able to learn it. Xiao Hua laughed. Why can't little brother learn it? Xiao Mao asked curiously. It's very simple. I didn't use any flying technique. I just drew out the true essence from my Jindan and pushed it in one direction. Then, my body easily flew in another direction. Xiao Hua shrugged his shoulders with some difficulty and said with a smile. So it's like that. Xiao Mao was helpless. At this moment, Fairy Hongxia opened her mouth again, as if saying something to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua didn't bother to say anything to Xiao Mao, and floated towards Fairy Hongxia's side. However, Xiao Hua only flew for about 10 feet, and a crimson-red brilliance suddenly bloomed around Fairy Hongxia's body. That brilliance was the color of blood, and was abnormally gorgeous, as if a fresh flower had suddenly appeared in the air. Although the blood-colored brilliance was poignant and beautiful, within the brilliance, Fairy Hongxia's face revealed an inexplicable expression. Xiao Hua, who was doing his best to activate his Jindan, was also stunned. Immediately, a kind of incomparable fear arose from the bottom of his heart. This is bad. Xiao Hua hurriedly looked around, as if he was trying to find the source of the danger. However, before he could see anything, the blood light around Fairy Hongxia's body suddenly stretched out, like a burning pillar of fire being blown up by the wind, floating straight towards the phoenix. In the silent space, a sudden vibration was produced. A sound that directly penetrated into Xiao Hua's heart came from under his feet. Immediately after, an extremely strong gravitational force came from the phoenix. It was like a huge hand that didn't allow Xiao Hua to resist in the slightest as it firmly grabbed him and pulled him towards the phoenix with all its strength. Xiao Hua was greatly shocked. He had great strength to begin with, so he was very clear about the difference between magic power and strength. He knew this kind of pure strength didn't have any fluctuation of magic power. It was basically a kind of strength between himself and the phoenix. This kind of strength was so vast and so unparalleled. Even if Xiao Hua converted all the magic power in his body into strength, he still wouldn't be able to contend against it. Is this the power of heaven and earth? Xiao Hua looked at the phoenix that was gradually being pulled closer and closer in disbelief. An indescribable vibration, and gradually, heat rose from his body. Not good! Xiao Hua was slightly shocked. He hurriedly mobilized his magic power again. Unfortunately, the magic power seemed to be intermittent, and couldn't support the protective golden light around him. Looking at Xiaohua's surroundings, Fairy Hongxia and the rest were also in the same position as Xiaohua. However, Fairy Hongxia's body was shrouded in a crimson glow. The glow flickered, protecting Fairy Hongxia tightly. I see. Xiaohua understood. This blood-colored brilliance was a kind of protection. It was to protect Fairy Hongxia, who had entered this space, and also to protect the descendants of the Kai family and the Ice Phoenix bloodline. As for himself and the rest, he had no relationship with the Kai family at all. Of course, he would be listed as an enemy by the Kai family's ancestral shrine. This kind of method was the best way to eliminate the enemy and screen the descendants. Wu! A sharp sound came from Xiaohua's ears, and a faint fiery light began to appear around Xiaohua's body. It was precisely Xiaohua's protective light that was produced due to the friction with the surrounding air as it fell at an extremely fast speed. Big brother! At this time, Xiaohua also heard Xiao Mao's shout, but he saw that Xiao Mao was still following beside him with his head down. His whole body was also on fire, and Xiao Mao's clothes had already started to burn. Innate primordial water! Almost immediately, Xiaohua thought of the innate primordial water in the clear water bottle. Xiaohua did not dare to be negligent. He hurriedly tried to activate the Buddha Saraira. Xiaohua thought that the Buddha Saraira would be as simple as primordial energy. Who would have thought that the Buddha Saraira would be the same as usual? It did not take much effort to activate it. The innate primordial water was like a light blue water curtain, protecting Xiaohua and the rest. Xiao Lang, let me out quickly! Unexpectedly, Fairy Hongxia said anxiously in just a moment. Under the innate primordial water, I can't sense the guidance of the ancestral phoenix statue, okay. Xiaohua knew the power of the innate primordial water. He hurriedly withdrew it from Fairy Hongxia's side. Rumble, the vibrations grew louder, and the group's speed became faster. Under the suction force, the innate primordial water was pulled into thin strips, and directly crashed into the phoenix. Big brother, big brother! Xiao Mao was extremely panicked. He whispered, "The speed is getting faster, much faster than our flying speed. To crash into the phoenix like this. How strong is the force? Will our bodies be able to withstand it?" "Don't worry." Xiaohua had experienced this before. He said calmly, "Flying speed is not a problem. The key is to protect yourself while flying. Didn't your senior sister also crash into the phoenix? She has the protection of the phoenix bloodline. If she also crashed into the phoenix, who in the Kai family would be able to enter the ancestral hall? According to Big Brother's opinion, there will be changes even before we crash into the phoenix. Why don't you take this opportunity to comprehend some of the flying speed?" "Oh. Okay," Xiao Mao nodded blankly. However, in his heart, he was puzzled. This flying speed? What is there to comprehend? Yes, no matter how fast this flying speed was, what could be comprehended? Not to mention Xiao Mao, even Li Zongbao couldn't comprehend the mysteries of flight. Only Xiaohua closed his eyes after speaking to Xiao Mao. He didn't release his divine sense or anything like that. He carefully experienced the changes in his body and the changes in his surroundings during this extremely fast flight. After all, in this lifetime, there were very few opportunities to fly at this speed. Even with Xiaohua's Imperial Thunder transformation, it was impossible for him to reach this speed. Even the slightest bit of understanding would be extremely beneficial for him to step into the Imperial Lightning Shock. Whoop! Outside of the innate primordial water, the air was rubbing against the surface of the innate primordial water, producing an unparalleled heat. A sharp, ear-splitting sound was gradually heard. Beside the azure water light of Xiaohua and the others, Fairy Hongxia's blood-red light was also swaying, dragging an extremely long tail. The four of them split into two groups, rushing towards the phoenix like a large and small meteor. Jie! A phoenix cry resounded through the entire space. Suddenly, a strong light appeared from the phoenix's forehead. The misty light scattered over the surface of the phoenix, as if covering the sky. It rushed towards Xiaohua and the others. Light! Light escape! Xiaohua was familiar with the sunlight on the Dawn Rain continent. Moreover, he had also seen the sun rise in the early morning. However, in this pitch-black space, that light had already appeared out of thin air, covering the sky and covering the earth. It was something he had never seen before. The instant he saw this light, Xiaohua was immediately stunned. He couldn't help but roar in his heart. This is light escape. The escape technique that fuses the body with light. It's a light escape technique that can be used even in the void and darkness. As long as there's light reaching a place, it can use the light escape technique. Following Xiaohua's groan, as the light passed through the darkness and sprinkled on everyone's bodies like thin threads, an indescribable feeling arose in Xiaohua's heart. Xiaohua's entire body, from his skin to his meridians, from his flesh to his bones, seemed to be filled with light. A feeling of fullness, a feeling of ascension was born. Xiaohua couldn't help but groan. His chest was instantly filled with a surge of excitement, making him want to stretch out his neck and sing loudly. Boom! There was a loud sound, as if Xiaohua's body had exploded inside, but also as if it had exploded outside of Xiaohua's body. Suddenly, everything came to a standstill, whether it was his body, his thoughts, or time. Xiaohua still had his eyes closed. He was unwilling to break away from the wonderful feeling just now. Although the light in his body was slowly fading away, that intense void was replacing it. Big brother! Xiao Mao called out with some hesitation. Beside him, Li Zongbao hurriedly pointed his hand and transmitted his voice. Quiet! Xiao Mao was stunned and quickly shut his mouth. However, Xiaohua had already opened his eyes. A thoughtful light flashed in his eyes, and he said with a smile, It's already too late. Immediately after, Xiaohua looked around and saw that this was a space of unknown size. Outside this space, there were countless rays of light flowing, very similar to the gorgeous brilliance in the night sky of Huan country. Looking at the space, there were many specks of stars floating above. These specks of stars all had the same appearance, and they were square tokens. There were faint fluctuations coming from these tokens, and occasionally, there would be faint phoenix patterns appearing from time to time. This is the Kai family's ancestral hall? Xiaohua was really stunned. It wasn't that he hadn't seen an ancestral hall before. An ordinary ancestral hall, like Zhongling Mountain Village, was an ancestral hall with the tablets of the ancestors placed there. A slightly more bizarre ancestral hall, like the one in Yellow Flower Ridge, was a palace with the tablets of the previous headmasters placed there, as well as the mysterious gods that were worshipped. When he came, Xiaohua had already imagined the Kai family's ancestral hall. However, he thought that Qin Yang's Kai family was at most similar to Zhongling Mountain Village. This ancestral hall was a secret ancestral hall, or perhaps there was a rather large palace under the ancestral hall. -11. Chapter 2841. However, Xiaohua did not expect the Kai family's ancestral shrine to be far beyond his expectations. How was this an ancestral shrine? It was even grander than the Xian Kong Pavilion in Haoming City. Legacy realm? Suddenly, Xiaohua thought of the legacy realm of the Yu family in Falling Gold Mountain. Looking at this scene, the Qin Yang Kai family must be the descendants of the divine beast Phoenix. Their ancestral shrine already had such a scene, then what about the so-called legacy realm of the Yu family in Falling Gold Mountain? That was the legacy realm that was known as an interface. Could this be related to the legacy realm? Xiaohua's eyes turned and looked around. In addition to these ranks, there were also colorful lights. Fairy Hongxia's figure was lying in midair, and this posture was used when she was practicing the flying shadow technique. Seeing Xiaohua looking around, Li Zongbao hurriedly transmitted his voice. Junior brother, let's go down. Don't delay junior sister's comprehension. As he spoke, he took the lead and walked a few steps in the air. There seemed to be invisible stairs in the air. Sure enough, Xiaohua also walked a few steps and was actually far away from Fairy Hongxia. Hence, the three of them simply walked a few miles before stopping. Damn it! Xiao Mao was the first to speak. This Kai family is really rich. How can their ancestral shrine be so big? When I was in Xiuyuan school, I really underestimated these cultivation families. Indeed. Even someone as knowledgeable as Li Zongbao nodded and said, if junior sister didn't bring me here, I would also think that the Kai family was just an ordinary family. Why is the Kai family's ancestral shrine in Million Mountain Meng? How can it have such a grand scene? This array, what kind of divine ability is needed to set it up? Xiao Hua asked a few questions in one breath. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao looked at each other. Both of them had the same question in their hearts, but who could answer? I only know that although this place is vast, its true size is no more than 50 kilometers. In fact, it's really the size of an ordinary clan's ancestral hall. Li Zongbao hesitated for a moment, then said in a low voice. However, there's an array here that's similar to the Meru array, and it's shrinking us. As for this totem, even though it's only the size of a hill, in our eyes, it's comparable to the entire Dawn Rain continent. Similar formation? Xiao Mao was slightly taken aback. He asked curiously, what kind of formation is that? Your storage pouch, Li Zongbao reminded. Many things, regardless of their size, can be stored in storage bags. This storage bag has a simple Sumeru array formation. So that's how it is. Xiao Mao came to a realization and looked around. What about now? Are we inside the Phoenix Totem? It should be. Xiao Hua nodded. That kind of extremely high-speed flight from before was like a teleportation array. When it reached a certain level, it teleported us into the Phoenix Totem. I've encountered such a powerful restriction before. However, he still had a lingering fear in his heart. But that huge suction force from the totem just now was really powerful. I don't know how this restriction was formed. Unexpectedly, Li Zongbao's words stunned Xiao Hua on the spot. I'm afraid it's the totem's own suction force on us. Of course, this suction force doesn't have any fluctuations of energy. It's naturally formed. It could really be the suction force of the Phoenix Totem. Jie, a clear cry faintly rang out. In the distance, Fairy Hong Xia's body flashed brilliantly, and the crystal-clear Phoenix celestial body was released. Instantly, even Xiao Hua and the rest could see that countless fireflies were flying in from outside the space. They were like moths to a flame, and they all fell into Fairy Hong Xia's celestial body. The celestial body immediately emitted the same brilliance as the Phoenix Totem outside the space. This brilliance was like breathing, and it was very uniform. More fireflies flew in, enveloping Fairy Hong Xia's physical body and celestial body. An extremely beautiful cocoon of light was born around Fairy Hong Xia's body. The brilliance continued to flash, and the fireflies continued to pour in. Very quickly, more than 10 days passed. The cocoon of light did not expand, but it gradually solidified. Xiao Hua and the rest closed their eyes and sat quietly in the distance, waiting for Fairy Hong Xia to emerge from the cocoon. Whoosh whoosh. Suddenly, a sound like the rising and falling of the tide came from the cocoon of light. Cracks gradually appeared on the surface of the cocoon of light. These cracks rapidly expanded, and it collapsed rapidly. Jie, an extremely loud phoenix cry rang out again, as if there were two sounds at the same time. One was from the Phoenix Totem outside the space, and the other was from Fairy Hong Xia's Phoenix celestial body. Following the phoenix cry, the collapsing cocoon of light suddenly retracted, and the entire cocoon of light was hidden within Fairy Hong Xia's physical body. At the same time, a 5-colored brilliance flashed across the sky, and a firework flashed across the sky, landing right on top of the cocoon of light. Fairy Hong Xia's body continued to flash, and all the brilliance gathered in between her eyebrows. A blood-red phoenix the size of a thumb, spreading its wings and about to fly, appeared there. Looking at the sparkling and translucent phoenix celestial body, it had returned to its original state. The 5-colored phenomenon from before had disappeared, and it looked the same as before. Moreover, the celestial body had shrunk to the size of 6 feet. Hee hee, Fairy Hong Xia chuckled, and looked up. She opened her mouth, and the 5-colored brilliance fell into her mouth. Her body did not move, But with a flap of the phoenix celestial body's wings, she immediately flew to the side of Xiao Hua and the rest at lightning speed. My goodness, senior sister flew too fast! Xiao Mao and the rest had already stood up when they heard the commotion. Xiao Mao could not help but exclaim in shock. Hee, I have obtained the phoenix legacy of my Kai family. I can move freely within the phoenix enchantment. Fairy Hongxia said proudly. Good! Li Zongbao clapped. Congratulations, junior sister, for not making a wasted trip. Thank you, senior brother. It's all because of your help that I can come here safely. Fairy Hongxia bowed and thanked him. What is the phoenix legacy? Can every descendant of the Kai family obtain it? Xiao Hua asked curiously. Not at all. Fairy Hongxia chuckled. Just like junior brother Xiao Mao, if one's bloodline is not pure, how can one obtain it? Or if one's cultivation does not reach a certain level, how can one enter the ancestral shrine? Moreover, my Kai family's phoenix legacy should be different from junior brother's, who is the descendant of God Shibai. This phoenix legacy can only be obtained by one person in every generation. Only when this person dies will the inheritance divine light return to the ancestral shrine and await the arrival of the next inheritor. So amazing! Xiao Hua was dumbfounded. He looked at Xiao Mao and then at Fairy Hongxia. These two people's luck seemed to be better than his. They really had a good background. Better than anyone else. Actually, I don't know about all these. Fairy Hongxia smiled. I only wanted to come to the ancestral shrine to see if there were any opportunities. Only when I was guided by the Phoenix Legacy's divine light and merged with the Phoenix Legacy did I understand so much. Moreover, within the divine light, there are many other things which will be slowly unearthed as I cultivate. Senior sister's cultivation. Xiao Mao could not help but cast a spell. However, Fairy Hongxia's cultivation did not seem to have any special changes. Of course, my cultivation won't have any changes in a dozen days. Fairy Hongxia smiled. These 10 days are only the initial stages of merging with the divine light. When the divine light completely merges with me, my cultivation will gradually speed up. However, based on my estimation, I will definitely be able to step into the golden core stage by next year. As she spoke, Fairy Hongxia opened her mouth, and the 5-colored brilliance flew out and landed in her soft hands. The brilliance gradually disappeared, revealing the true form of a phoenix feather. This is my Kai family's phoenix token, Fairy Hongxia said happily. This is a feather that my ancestors obtained from the heavenly phoenix. Its profundity is endless. Congratulations, senior sister, Xiao Mao said happily. Everyone's luck is different. Junior brother's fate seems to be more powerful than mine. Fairy Hongxia held the phoenix token and said, I thought that coming to Ming Mountains was my business, but I did not expect that junior brother's business is more important than mine. She then looked at Xiao Hua and Li Zongbao and said embarrassedly. On the other hand, Xiao Lang and senior brother came empty-handed and returned empty-handed. As long as you have a chance encounter, wouldn't you be much stronger than me? Xiao Hua naturally understood that what he had obtained was not any less than Xiao Mao and Fairy Hongxia. He smiled and said, Senior brother Li, on the other hand, came here for nothing. Not at all. I even obtained a spirit item, Li Zongbao said. At this moment, the space began to vibrate. A repulsive force similar to the one before was produced. Don't worry, the Phoenix Barrier is about to close, Fairy Hongxia said unhurriedly. Only when my Phoenix Divine Light returns will the Phoenix Barrier have a chance to open. We don't need to struggle, we just need to let the barrier push us out. As soon as her voice fell, everyone's figure soared into the sky, flying out at a speed even faster than Xiao Hua's Imperial Thunder Shock. Only this time, there were no sparks forming around them. Xiao Hua hurriedly closed his eyes, trying to comprehend the rare speed. GG. After an unknown amount of time, an extremely hot aura suddenly surrounded Xiao Hua. Moreover, before Xiao Hua could open his eyes, a very familiar sound of an ape's cry came from above his head. Then, an unpleasant stench rushed into Xiaohua's mouth and nose. This is. Xiaohua stared blankly. Before he could open his eyes and release his divine sense, a sharp sound that seemed to tear the air apart resounded from his forehead, and a piercing pain appeared on his skin. Xiaohua's body was naturally surrounded by a protective golden light, but he did not dare to be careless. He shrank his head and curled his body into a ball. In an extremely strange posture, he flew to the side like a spinning windmill. -11. Chapter 2842. Rip, an ear-piercing sound of silk being torn apart rang out. An extremely sharp force slashed right at Xiaohua's right arm. Wherever the brilliance flashed, the golden light protecting his body was actually torn apart by this force, and the brilliance surrounding Xiaohua's body was also extinguished. Fire Ape! Xiaohua was greatly shocked. He immediately activated the wind escape technique, and floated several zhang away. His gaze swept across, and sure enough, he saw 100 zhang tall fire ape. This fire ape had an extremely ferocious face, and the wide mouth and fangs on its face were suffused with a kind of blood-red color. The fire ape's fur was golden yellow, and from time to time, flames would emerge from its fur, lingering around the fire ape. A tyrannical aura also enveloped the nearby area. Wasn't this the golden core stage fire ape from Flaming Forest Marsh? Why did this guy run to Million Man Mountain? Xiaohua stood in midair. He swept with his divine sense, but didn't see the figures of Li Zongbao and the others. Only then did he feel slightly relieved. His gaze once again fell on the fire ape, and he thought very strangely. Looking at the fire ape again, within its wild and untamed eyes, there was clearly astonishment, as if it was as confused as Xiaohua. However, when it clearly saw Xiaohua's appearance, a kind of joy actually appeared in its eyes. Aol! A cheerful long howl, its bloody mouth rushed into the air, and a faint flame spurted out. Immediately after, it crossed its arms and hammered its own chest, causing sparks to fly out from its fur, as if they were blooming fireworks. Sun-Moon Corona! Xiaohua's eyes narrowed. He immediately thought of the ancestral artifacts of Misty Mountain and Flying Phoenix Ridge. Those things seemed to have a restraining effect on the fire ape, and at the same time, the fire ape seemed to be somewhat interested in the Sun-Moon Corona. However, before Xiaohua could take out the Sun-Moon Corona, the fire ape not far away lowered its head, and stared at Xiaohua with a fierce gaze. Flames flickered under its feet, and it flew towards Xiaohua. Its huge fist streaked across the air, and flames were also produced. It was like 2 fireballs were held in the fire ape's hand, and it rushed towards Xiaohua. Ha ha ha, I've already met you 3 times. Xiaohua laughed loudly. As the saying goes, there's only 1 time and 2 times, but not 3 times and 4 times. Now, I'll let you know how powerful I am. As he spoke, Xiaohua waved his hand and took out several fire talismans. He urged his magic power and threw them at the fire ape. Roar! The fire ape seemed to have understood Xiaohua's words. It let out a loud roar and a trace of disdain flashed through its eyes. Its giant hand was like a mountain as it smashed down toward Xiaohua, who was like a toy in its eyes. Rumble! The fire talisman itself didn't have much magic power fluctuation. When Xiaohua activated it, this time, it absorbed a huge amount of spiritual qi of heaven and earth. One after another, huge fireballs exploded around the fire ape. That ferocious force and the fierce flames all rolled towards the fire ape. Boom, boom, boom! The fire ape was clearly somewhat surprised, but there was no panic in its eyes. The fist that was smashing towards Xiaohua changed slightly. It hammered continuously, like the beating of a drum, and hit the numerous fireballs. The fireball talismans, which even swordsmen would find difficult to dodge, were actually destroyed by the fire ape as if they were playing with fire. The last fireball was even destroyed by the fire ape's palm. Heh heh, it's indeed the fire ape. This fire-controlling technique is innate. Ordinary people can only look up to its dust. Xiaohua sighed. He boasted that he already had some understanding of the divine fire technique, but in terms of fire controlling technique, he was clearly inferior to this fire ape. He didn't have the confidence that he could easily crush the fire talismans when they exploded. Roar! The fire ape cracked open its mouth, as if it was mocking and showing off. It waved its hands and a series of fireballs were born from its hands. It threw them towards Xiaohua as if it was playing with fire. Eh? Xiaohua saw the mocking in the fire ape's eyes and his heart was also stunned. Without thinking, he waved his hand and dozens of fire talismans once again flew out. Rumble! The fire talismans exploded between Xiaohua and the fire ape. The flames soared into the sky and enveloped the surrounding area of 100 zhang. The shockwave even stirred up the dust within 100 zhang. There were even some mountain rocks that were blown away by the fireballs. The entire scene was a complete mess. Roar! This time, the fire ape was completely enraged. It used all its strength to open its bloody mouth and its teeth made a ga sound. With a loud roar, its 10 zhang tall body slightly swayed and actually flashed within the flames. It quickly rushed in front of Xiaohua and its huge fist smashed towards Xiaohua's body with the sound of the wind. Fire escape! Xiaohua was even more stunned. This was the first time the fire ape used the fire escape in front of him. Even that day in the flame forest swamp, it didn't use it when it was in a dangerous situation. It seemed that the fire ape's strength had greatly improved in these past few decades. However, when Xiaohua saw the fire ape approaching him, he was not afraid at all. With a wave of his hand, he took out his enormous spiked club. With a woo sound, he welcomed the fire ape's fist head-on. Suddenly seeing the huge wolf-tooth club, the fire ape was also slightly stunned. Looking at Xiaohua waving the wolf-tooth club that was bigger than itself like a baby, it was really frightened. Pun! A loud sound echoed. While the fire ape was still in a daze, the wolf-tooth club hit its fist. The fire ape's fist was shaken and the magic tool wolf-tooth club also let out a zzz sound. The fire ape lowered its head and looked at its fist in disbelief. Soon after, it raised its head and its eyes were already scarlet red. Roar! Roar! The fire ape roared 3 times and waved its arms as if it was angry. The flames around its body also suddenly rushed out and attacked Xiaohua's head. Come! How could Xiaohua be afraid of it? He roared without fear and waved his wolf-tooth club. His body flew up and fought with the fire ape. A deafening roar sounded and flames splashed around the surroundings. Not to mention the rocks, even the dust was refined by the fire ape's flames and turned into pitch-black beads that rolled around. The mess on the rocks was also the remnants of the flames. Furthermore, countless large holes were left behind by the fire ape's fists, or by Xiaohua's wolf-tooth club. After fighting for the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, Fairy Hong Xia and the rest still didn't appear. Instead, the fire ape's roars became even louder. The fire ape wasn't proficient in controlling fire, and its arms had a huge strength that could tear apart tigers and leopards. In this kind of close combat, other than in a group fight, it had never suffered such a big loss. Now that it saw a cultivator who was much shorter than it, and was actually in a deadlock with it, it had long lost its rationality. Its eyes were abnormally scarlet red and it opened its bloody mouth that emitted a disgusting stench, as if it would only be satisfied if it ate Xiaohua alive. Pun! Xiaohua's figure was like a light wind and flew out from under the fire ape's armpit. He didn't even turn his head and casually swung his wolf-tooth club, smashing it on the fire ape's back. Although the fire ape's skin was thick and its body was protected by flames, when sparks flew, the fire ape's figure actually staggered and fell forward. However, the fire ape actually took advantage of this moment and lifted its foot, as if it wanted to stomp Xiaohua into meat paste. Go! Xiaohua didn't hesitate and raised the wolf-tooth club in his hand, hitting it on the fire ape's foot. Ayo! The fire ape let out a sorrowful cry, as if it was in pain. It hugged its foot and fell in midair. This fire ape is quite interesting. Xiaohua was somewhat hypocritical. However, it's too arrogant and unruly. Woo! Immediately after, the fire ape pounded its own chest and opened its mouth. A turbulent pillar of fire rushed out from its mouth and enveloped Xiao Hua. Ha ha ha, you want to compete with this young master in fire techniques? Xiao Hua laughed loudly. The wolf-tooth club in his hand disappeared after a pause. Immediately after, he opened his mouth and spat out a cold flame, like a fire net, to meet the fire ape's attack. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. The two types of fire fused together. However, Xiao Hua's cold flame only lasted for a moment before it was broken by many thin flames. It was as if thousands of small fire snakes were licking Xiao Hua's left side. "Io, this fire ape is really powerful!" Xiao Hua faintly smiled. With a wave of his hand, he took out the magic bottle that contained the innate true fire. This magic bottle couldn't be considered a high-grade item, and Xiao Hua didn't really refine it. At this moment, he activated his magic power and a wisp of innate true fire flickered within the magic bottle. Immediately after, a suction force was produced and the fire ape's pillar of fire was sucked into it, leaving not even a drop behind. Woo woo! A trace of astonishment flashed through the fire ape's scarlet eyes. It seemed to have seen the power of the innate true fire. However, at this moment, it was already controlled by anger. It opened its bloody mouth again and an unconcealable confinement force was produced from its mouth. Immediately after, the fire ape spat out a fiery red nidin from its mouth. The situation of this nidin was different from the first time the fire ape appeared. When the nidin was spat out in the air, the surrounding dozens of feet was enveloped by a kind of pressure. A faint confinement force was emitted from this pressure, and traces of sparks were faintly discernible within this range of dozens of feet. Woo! A strange hissing sound was produced from the nidin. An enormous force mixed with extreme heat was emitted from the nidin at the same time and smashed towards Xiao Hua. "Come at me!" Xiao Hua slapped his forehead and released the pressure of the gold core to contend with the might of the nidin. At the same time, he waved his hand and took out the seal of overturning the sea. However, when Xiao Hua activated the seal of overturning the sea, his heart shook and the seal of overturning the sea disappeared from his hand. Xiao Hua raised his hand and slapped his forehead again. Immediately, a hurricane was produced from his forehead. That hurricane was so sharp that it was like wind blades, cutting apart the confinement of the nidin within dozens of feet. Moreover, in the air, the faintly discernible wisps of fire were blown away like candles in the wind, on the verge of collapse. What's more, the spiritual qi of heaven and earth within hundreds of feet of Xiao Hua condensed in the direction of Xiao Hua. The huge rocks and dust that were shattered by the fight between the two were all swept up by this hurricane. The hand of a nascent soul. -11. Chapter 2843. Previously, when Xiao Hua was in the sword tomb, he had occasionally revealed his nascent soul stage hand. However, at that time, it was not too mature. It could even be said that he only had a little bit of experience. During this period of time, although Xiao Hua hadn't used it again, he had always been thinking about it in his heart. He had always been trying to comprehend it. With the heaven and earth sleeve as a foundation, although this nascent soul hand might not be pure, when he really used it now, it was quite decent. The hurricane mixed with the gravel and sand condensed into a huge palm. It was as if a real huge hand was grabbing towards the inner core. A restraining force that could compete with or even surpass the restraining force of the inner core was born from the hand. Although it hadn't really grasped the inner core, the previously ferocious golden core had now lost all its momentum under the giant hand. The previously spiraling golden core had become sluggish, and it didn't even move in the air. Aol! At this moment, the fire ape's crimson eyes became somewhat clear. A trace of panic flashed through it. It really could not understand why Xiao Hua, who it had met once before, was so powerful now. The fire ape roared angrily. The crimson inner core suddenly flashed with a circle of intense brilliance. Even though Xiao Hua was far away, he still felt an indescribable heat. The nascent soul stage hand that was covering the inner core was immediately burned by this heat and dissipated. Powerful, Xiao Hua was greatly shocked. He hurriedly flung his Taoist robe, wanting to use the heaven and earth sleeve technique to stabilize the nascent soul stage hand. At this moment, the fire ape's inner core suddenly retreated and fell into the fire ape's mouth. Moreover, the fire ape did not hesitate at all. Flames flashed under its feet, and it prepared to escape into the distance. At this time, you still want to leave? Xiaohua sneered. His figure swayed, and lightning flashed under his feet as he chased after the fire ape. Roar! The fire ape did not expect Xiaohua's flying speed to be so fast. In a moment, he had already arrived behind it. It hurriedly roared, and that roar shook the surroundings, echoing in the mountains. Eh? Hearing the fire ape's cry and the fire ape's anxious expression, Xiaohua suddenly had a bad feeling. Damn it, this fire ape is so strange. The first time I saw it in Flaming Forest Swamp, it was with the Thunder Beast. It seemed like it was the one who lured the Thunder Beast here. But today, it actually came all the way to the Meng Mountains. Could it be that there are still Thunder Beasts here? Just as he was thinking about it, a spiritual sense comparable to that of a nascent soul cultivator swept over, and a hoarse voice rang out from afar. No way! As that divine sense swept past Xiaohua, a scorching and ferocious feeling spread out from that divine sense, causing Xiaohua's divine sense to feel a stinging pain. What kind of spirit beast is this? How can it be so powerful? When the fire ape sensed this divine thought, it let out a loud cry of joy and flew towards the source of the sound without caring about anything else. Humph, even if another lightning beast comes, you can forget about escaping from my hands. Xiaohua knew that this fire ape had some connection with the Misty Mountain. The powerful restriction in the Sun-Moon Corona most likely needed this fire ape, and the soul seal inside had to be unsealed for Shui Shui. How could Xiaohua release this fire ape? While thinking, Xiaohua waved his hand, and the Sun-Moon Corona appeared in his hand. Aol! An extremely sorrowful cry was heard. As soon as the Sun-Moon Corona appeared, it was sensed by the fire ape. The fire ape turned its head to look at the Sun-Moon Corona, which was overflowing with brilliance, and immediately let out a cry, fleeing even more desperately. Go! Xiaohua urged his magic power, and the Sun-Moon Corona within the Sun-Moon Corona rotated like a sun, and the Sun-Moon Corona rotated around the Sun-Moon Corona in the opposite direction. The Sun-Moon Corona was incomparably brilliant as it chased after the fire ape. In the blink of an eye, the Sun-Moon Corona caught up with the fire ape. Woo! A powerful suction force was generated from the Sun-Moon Corona, enveloping the fire ape. Withdraw! Xiaohua faintly smiled. The Sun-Moon Corona let out a buzzing sound, and the entire magic artifact shook. The suction force was like waves, rushing towards the fire ape's head. Aol! The fire ape raised its hand high up, covering its head. Its facial features were all distorted, and it felt extreme pain. A faintly discernible fire shadow appeared on top of the fire ape's head, gradually moving towards the Sun-Moon Corona. See! A hoarse cry was heard, and the divine sense in the distance became even more furious. Xiaohua felt as if the air around him was about to be ignited, and a kind of dryness that he had never experienced before gradually emerged from the bottom of his heart. Xiaohua did not dare to release his divine sense, and raised his head to look. Right at the origin of the sound, a 3-zhang tall monster with a body full of red fur was flying towards him on a red cloud. This monster was very strange. It seemed to have the shape of a human, but the movements of its limbs were very stiff, and its arms and legs did not seem to be able to bend. What puzzled Xiaohua the most was that this monster's entire body was covered in red fur. The fine fur covered the monster's entire body, and not a single bit of skin was exposed. Moreover, there was a layer of fine powdery substance on top of the red fur, and it faintly emitted a phosphorescent light. This body hair was so luxuriant that it actually completely covered the monster's face, and its appearance could not be seen clearly. Only a pair of eyes could be seen through the gaps of the fur. This is a human? Or a soul beast? Xiaohua thought inwardly, but his gaze once again fell on the monster's 2 enormous breasts. Those enormous breasts were no different from an ordinary girl's breasts, but they were much bigger. Aol! When Xiaohua saw this monster, the fire ape naturally also saw it. A heart-wrenching roar came from the fire ape's mouth, and it was asking for help. See, that monster also raised its head and roared, but its voice was not as loud as the fire ape's. However, Xiaohua could still hear that soft voice. As the monster's voice entered his ears, Xiaohua's mind slightly shook, and his vision became a little blurry. Good boy! Xiaohua was greatly alarmed, and he hurriedly used God's guidance. A strand of coolness flowed through his mind, and the thirst of his divine sense was somewhat alleviated, but his mind was still a little shaky. Xiaohua did not dare to be negligent, and he hurriedly released his soul strands to block the monster's attack. The soul strands vibrated freely, blocking the monster's attack. Looking at the fire ape again, the silhouette of the fire ape that had been sucked out earlier gradually returned to its original position, and its body that was tumbling in the air also stopped. You still want to leave at this time? Even if this young master does not take your life, I will not let you go. Xiaohua sneered, and pointed his finger. A few words of incantation came out, and the brilliance of the sun-moon corona changed again. The sun-moon corona gradually shrunk, and the sun-moon corona flattened, turning into something similar to a Tao crown. Go! Xiaohua pointed his finger again, and a wave of magic power surged. With a so sound, the Tao crown landed on the fire ape's head. The fire ape was greatly alarmed, and its two claws grabbed the sides of the Tao crown, exerting all its strength to take it away from its head. Tight! The corner of Xiaohua's mouth rose into a slight smile. This sun-moon corona method was something that he obtained when he was refining it. At that time, he did not know what use it had, but today, he found out that it actually had such a miraculous use. Roar! A deafening roar came out from the fire ape's mouth. The pain on the fire ape's face was even more intense than before, and its entire body fell to the ground in midair. Its two claws rapidly scratched its head, and traces of blood seeped out. It was actually the fire ape's claws that had scratched it. However, that Tao crown seemed to have taken root on its head. No matter how it struggled, even if it used its head to hit the ground, that Tao crown did not move in the slightest. Boom! A light sound rang out, and a flame flashed above Xiaohua's head. It was as if the true fire within Xiaohua's body had uncontrollably erupted. Moreover, an incomparable impatience suddenly emerged from the bottom of his heart, and a kind of pressure that came from the inside out was about to explode. Xiaohua did not have time to deal with the fire ape. He raised his head to look again, and this time, he was truly stunned. Right next to the monster, hundreds and thousands of soul beasts suddenly appeared, and on the backs of these soul beasts stood soul warriors. Damn it, this fire ape is really a genius! Xiaohua could not help but praise in his heart. Previously, you were together with the incomparably powerful thunder beast in Flame Forest Swamp, and now you've come all the way to Million Miles Mountain, and even become friends with this monster and soul beasts. If this young master really killed you, it would be a waste of my talent. Xiaohua did not have the confidence to deal with this monster, and he did not want to fight against a soul warrior. His body quickly descended, and with a wave of his hand, the universe in the sleeve was unleashed, and in an instant, the fire ape was imprisoned. Under the double imprisonment of the sun-moon corona and the universe in the sleeve, the fire ape only had the strength to tear apart tigers and leopards, and the ability to control true fire. Now, like a dead animal, it was lifted up by Xiaohua. Xiaohua then took out a spirit pouch and threw the fire ape into it. After easily dealing with the fire ape, Xiaohua glanced at the monster that was still some distance away from him. That monster's limbs were stiff, and it flew rather slowly. Xiaohua might not be able to fight against this monster's strange ability, but it seemed that escaping from the monster and the soul warrior's eyes was not a difficult matter. However, seeing the numerous soul warriors flying over from all over the mountains and plains, Xiaohua suddenly came to a realization. Oh, not good! Where are my wife and the others? Thinking of this, Xiaohua did not dare to be negligent, and released his divine sense. Who would have thought that just as Xiaohua released his divine sense, a feeling of being thrown into an oven immediately came over from his divine sense. The surroundings seemed to be filled with waves of fire, and the indescribable fire was burning. The needles forced Xiaohua to have no choice but to withdraw his divine sense. However, his Buddhist sense, which had always been useful, was also forced to withdraw by the fire. Moreover, his Buddhist sense was not as good as his divine sense, and there was actually a burning sensation. What is this monster? Xiaohua was stunned. He knew that the Million Ming Mountains were mysterious, and that it was a place that Taoist cultivators did not dare to enter. However, he still did not expect that, even though they were not even in the depths of the Million Ming Mountains, and were still in the Kai family's ancestral shrine, with his strength comparable to a nascent soul cultivator, he was unable to deal with a monster that he had not even seen before. This won't do. Even if my cultivation is damaged, I still have to find my wife and the others' whereabouts. Xiaohua was very anxious. His figure rose into the sky, and he released his divine sense again. -11. Chapter 2844. It was really like a naked man jumping into a lake of fire. Ever since Xiaohua started cultivating, he had suffered a lot. Lightning tribulation, body sculpting, bone tempering, 10,000 years of solitude, etc. However, it seemed that he could not avoid those sufferings. He was forced to face them. But this time was different. He could have retracted his divine sense. Perhaps everything would be fine. Perhaps he could have escaped this hellish suffering. However, Xiaohua did not dare to retract his divine sense. He understood that with his poor sense of direction, he would lose track of Fairy Hong Xia and the others as soon as he flew up. He could only go further and further away, and he would never be able to find them. Xiaohua could only rely on his divine sense. Ordinary people would not be able to understand the feeling of falling into a lake of fire. Even if their hands touched the flames, they would be burned. How could ordinary people reach their hands into the flame again? Although it was possible to pull chestnuts out of the fire, the process was extremely short. How could it be compared to Xiaohua's torment of jumping into the fire? That deep pain would occasionally pierce his divine sense. It was as if thousands of sharp needles were constantly attacking Xiaohua. Roar! Xiaohua roared, as if he wanted to roar out the pain. He did not dare to stay in the air for long. Lightning flickered around his body as he flew towards the monster. Rumble! Xiaohua's hands danced in the air as if he had gone crazy. The dark clouds in the sky surged rapidly, gradually accumulating. Dozens of lightning bolts struck down like sharp swords. All the lightning bolts had only one target, and that was the flying monster. Hiss! The monster saw the change in the sky and stopped in midair. It looked at the sky with great astonishment, then looked at Xiaohua. When the lightning struck, the monster's body immediately landed on top of a hill. Strangely, the hillside was the same as the other places. Because of the changes in Ming Mountains, there was no vegetation growing on it. It looked like it was filled with rocks and dust. However, when the monster's feet stepped on the hillside, an indescribable yellow color appeared under the monster's feet and rapidly spread across the entire hillside. Cracks quickly appeared on the hard boulders, and after a lot of cracks, they turned into powder. It was as if the monster had absorbed the last bit of moisture on the hillside. Hiss! Xiaohua clearly saw this strange scene and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He was immediately stunned, as if he had thought of something. Hitorigami! This is a drought demon! Xiaohua suddenly cried out in shock. Once the drought demon appears, the land will be dyed red for thousands of miles. Damn it, could this drought demon be the cause of the abnormal changes in Ming Mountains? No, that's not right. The drought demon was born because of the change in the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Rumble! Xiaohua's cry was really effective. The pain in his divine sense actually lessened a little. Xiaohua naturally didn't dare to be negligent. His body turned into a bolt of lightning and rapidly flew toward a place, wanting to get away from this drought demon. Hiss hiss! The place where the lightning fell was precisely the standing drought demon. The threads of lightning, the lightning, and the flickering lightning net all fell. However, the drought demon raised both of its hands slightly, as if it was raising fire to burn the sky. Countless lightning bolts fell on its body, causing it to fall to the ground. However, when the drought demon stood up very tenaciously, Xiaohua discovered that these heavenly lightning actually only knocked down some red hair and didn't hurt the drought demon in the slightest. Isn't this a little too powerful? Xiaohua's eyeballs were about to fall out. Although he knew that the drought demon had a head of copper and arms of iron, and that its entire body was hard, but he didn't expect it to be this hard. Wu Hanba let out a rare cry. Xiaohua's entire body made a whoosh sound, as if it was about to explode. A splitting sensation emerged from his skull. Furthermore, that divine sense that was originally already covered in burns was actually cleaved apart by a kind of sharpness that was like a fiery sword. Motherfucker, how long has it been? My divine sense was already injured by the drought demon. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. He still stubbornly released his divine sense, continuing to sweep towards the distance. At this moment, the previously distant soul beasts were also flying closer. These soul beasts' bodies had some faint green brilliance. These green brilliances intertwined with each other, covering half the sky. Xiaohua's divine sense swept across some of these green brilliances, and a cool feeling entered his body. It was very pleasant. However, this feeling only lasted for a moment before the green brilliance began to corrode Xiaohua's divine sense, burning even more fiercely than the fire. Damn it! Xiaohua cursed angrily. He didn't want to get caught up in a fight with these soul warriors. His figure slightly turned, and he flew towards the side of the soul warriors. Unexpectedly, when they saw Xiaohua fly away, those soul warriors acted as if they didn't know. They continued to chase in the direction they came from, which was the direction where the drought demon fell. Moreover, because the drought demon was now flying and chasing after Xiaohua, it even waved the soul weapon in its hand, causing a sky full of green brilliance to pounce towards the drought demon. Oh, I understand now, Xiaohua suddenly realized. These millions of Meng Mountain soul cultivators are here to kill the drought demon. They're not here to help the drought demon save the fire ape. However, soon after, Xiaohua was stunned. But how can these soul cultivators kill the drought demon? But at this moment, Xiaohua's divine sense seemed to have discovered something. His face changed greatly, and a surge of anger involuntarily rose from the bottom of his heart. His divine sense retracted in a sorry state, and the lightning around his body flickered as he flew into the distance. It was actually the Imperial Lightning transformation that Xiaohua rarely used. Rumble. Xiaohua wasn't the only one flying. The dark clouds and lightning that had gathered in the sky earlier were also surging with Xiaohua into the distance. It seemed like Xiaohua's anger was soaring to the heavens. And the drought demon that was chasing after Xiaohua was also chasing after him. Because the drought demon had changed direction, it ran into the soul warriors. The green brilliance that blotted out the sky and covered the earth was like a gigantic tentacle that grabbed at the drought demon. Hiss. The drought demon's eyes that were covered by its red hair revealed a look of anger. It stretched out its hand and grabbed at the air a few times. A scorching heat comparable to the hand of a nascent soul cultivator shot up into the air. Hiss. The green brilliance of the drought demon melted in an instant, as if the green brilliance was being washed away by a flood. Roar. The dozen or so soul warriors that were closest to the drought demon waved the soul weapons in their hands. The soul beasts under their feet also spat out a green brilliance, and an obscure wave of energy enveloped the drought demon. Huff. Seemingly hit by the soul warriors, the drought demon shook its head slightly and opened its mouth to roar at the soul warriors. Woo. Seeing this, the soul warriors were overjoyed. They roared to each other, and urged their soul beasts to gather even more soul warriors to attack. And the soul incantations in their mouths were rapidly recited, wanting to launch a fatal attack on the drought demon. Seeing so many soul warriors blocking its way, and even more so, becoming more and more difficult to deal with like flies, the drought demon lost its last bit of patience. Looking at Xiaohua's already disappearing figure, it opened its mouth to roar again and stretched out its hand to grab. Bang, bang, bang. A series of explosions rang out. Several soul warriors that were in the middle of reciting soul incantations and urging their soul beasts to attack the drought demon inexplicably exploded. All of their flesh and blood scattered down like powder. And the soul beasts they were riding also fell from the sky. GGGG. The remaining soul cultivators were somewhat scared. It seemed that after chasing for half a day, only now did they realize how powerful the drought demon was. Unfortunately, how could the attack of over 1,000 people be so easily stopped? The soul warriors behind these soul warriors continued to urge their soul beasts to chase after the drought demon. Soul incantations were also released. Pa 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 pa. A series of sounds rang out. It was like swatting flies. One after another, the soul warriors' flesh and blood exploded, and one after another, their soul beasts fell from the sky. Even the soul warriors who didn't notice before instinctively heard it. After all, this wasn't a fight with swordsmen. This was a one-sided massacre. These soul warriors were simply no match for the drought demon. Roar. The drought demon opened its mouth and laughed. All of the soul warriors were so scared that they urged their soul beasts to retreat. The scene was like a rising tide forcing itself to retreat. It was quite a spectacular sight. The drought demon ignored these soul warriors and continued to fly in the direction of Xiaohua. It seemed that the fire ape was very important to it. The remaining soul warriors stood in the sky for a moment. Seeing no trace of Yu and Ho Yen, they looked at each other and urged their soul beasts to chase after the drought demon again. But this time, they only dared to stay far away. Activating the green defensive brilliance, no one dared to fly half a step. Where did Yu and Ho Yen go? When the two of them were killing the drought demon, they naturally commanded the soul warriors to attack. However, the drought demon didn't want to fight them and they couldn't kill it. Originally, they chased after the drought demon to see if they could find any opportunities. The direction the drought demon went was naturally where the fire ape was, and this place wasn't far from the mountain peak where Xiao Mao put down Qie and the two blue witch feathers. Hundreds or even thousands of soul beasts flew past. Qie might not have known, but Qing Wuyu already knew. The two soul beasts didn't have any intelligence. They just flapped their wings and flew into the air, leaving Qie jumping and shouting on the mountain peak. Yu and Ho Yen were both wise people. After seeing the power of the drought demon, they knew that this trip was a failure. However, Ho Yen couldn't just turn back. He sent his subordinates back and continued to mobilize the other soul warriors while continuing to chase after the drought demon. Yu, on the other hand, had already achieved his goal. He wasn't afraid to follow behind Ho Yen. While they were quietly discussing how to deal with the drought demon, the blue witch feathers had already flown close to them. At first, Yu didn't care. The blue witch feathers were just ordinary soul beasts in the millions of Ming mountains. Who knew where these two soul beasts came from? But 7 was different. He thought about it for a while and figured it out. He knew that Xiao Mao had saved the soul beast in the Bayan stronghold. Although he didn't know that Xiao Mao had brought 2 soul beasts with him, how could 2 soul beasts suddenly appear in such a barren place? 7 hurriedly reported this to Yu. Yu was a calculative person. Once he was reminded, he immediately understood. He was overjoyed and asked for help from Ho Yen. 11. You're tuning into the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.